Chapter 1304, All Out. Chapter 1304, All Out. Wow! A dozen of Universe God Qing Yang appeared on the training field from nowhere. Every Universe God Qing Yang looked identical, without any difference. The dozen Universe God Qing Yangs besieged Jian Wushuang in the middle. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. At the border of the training field, there was a sudden commotion. Oh my god! A dozen Universe God Qing Yangs? This should be a secret skill. But the secret skill is very impressive. Those illusionary figures were hard to differentiate. Universe God in the second heaven, couldn't even identify his original body among these figures. The noise resounded in the universe. Everyone was terrified. Even the master of Deyu Palace and Wu Tsang, who were seated in the void above the training field, were shocked too. The secret skill is quite bizarre. Even I couldn't identify his original body among them. Wu Tsang's, can you tell? The master of Deyu Palace asked. He's just standing there without making a move. I can't differentiate them as well, Wu Tsang shook his head and said, but if he were to take action, the moment he makes a hit, there'd definitely be divine power. By then, we should be able to tell which is his original body. A dozen Universe God Qing Yang stood around Jian Wushuang. He couldn't tell which was the original body and which were illusionary clones of Universe God Qing Yang. Jian Wushuang. Die! The dozen Universe God Qing Yangs spoke simultaneously and his voice came from all directions. From the voices, they still couldn't tell which was the original body of Universe God Qing Yang. Then, the dozen Universe God Qing Yang took action before everyone's gaze. Those Universe God Qing Yangs slowly raised the black sickles in their hands. The moment they raised their sickles, a strong power soared up into the sky. The shocking part was that the power was derived from all directions as well. The divine power that soared up felt the same. They carried an aura of fierce divine power. Wu Tsang and the master of Deyu Palace creased their eyebrows. I can't tell. Even when he took action, I can't tell which one is his original body. Such an amazing secret skill, Wu Tsang said softly. There were many secret skills that could create illusionary figures in eternal chaotic world. Forget about the eternal chaotic world, Jian Wushuang had even encountered some in the green fire world. However, even with the same kind of secret skill, the difference was ridiculously vast. The secret skill that Universe God Qing Yang was performing, even the master of Deyu Palace and Wu Tsang couldn't tell which was his original body. It was really amazing. If he can't identify the original body, he wouldn't be able to identify which attacks are real and which are fake. How could he withstand the attacks then? The master of Deyu Palace was shocked. Jian Wushuang is in big trouble. Wu Tsang said. Everyone around the training field was in terror. The experts from Scarlet Island were worried for Jian Wushuang. They thought Jian Wushuang was in a very bad situation. While on the training field, Jian Wushuang, who was surrounded by dozens of Universe God Qing Yang, looked fairly calm. He didn't reveal one bit of terror. Die! The shrill scream spread from all directions. Universe God Qing Yang prepared for his attack and the dozen of Universe God Qing Yang slammed down the black sickle in their hands. Suddenly, there was over a dozen pitch-black faint lights that permeated the air in a similar manner and charged at Jian Wushuang from all directions. Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted and he squeezed the Blood Mountain sword in his hand, but his eyes were fixed on one of the sword lights. Then, he lifted his sword and swung it straightforwardly. Swoosh! The sword light swept and collided directly with that faint light. Dang! A deep clashing sound immediately resounded in the void. What? Everyone around the training field was caught by surprise. Including the master of Deyu Palace and Wu Tsang in the void, who revealed a shocking expression. Even though the master of Deyu Palace and Wu Tsang were both Universe God of the third heaven, they couldn't differentiate the fake and real attack from where they were standing. But then, Jian Wushuang took action and found the real attack straight away. Shattered. The void was torn and there was an enormous amount of divine power dispersing. Humph. Jian Wushuang snorted and charged forward. He immediately appeared before one of the universe god Qing Yang. Then, he swung the Blood Mountain sword directly. The universe god Qing Yang before Jian Wushuang immediately revealed an expression of disbelief. How is it possible? How could he know which is my original body? This technique, even universe god in the second heaven couldn't differentiate. Even for universe god in the third heaven, if they were to only watch from the side, they might not be able to differentiate. But, Jian Wushuang, he was just a universe master, he could see through my technique and find my original body with one glance? Universe god Qing Yang was extremely shocked but he quickly responded. So what if you found my original body? You still have to die. Universe god Qing Yang's glare was cold and the surrounding illusionary figure vanished immediately. There was suddenly a black secret pattern that rapidly emerged on his body. The black secret pattern surfaced and it covered his body in that instant. It even covered the black sickle of his hand. With the black secret pattern, his aura, which was already fierce, became even more ferocious. Kill! Universe god Qing Yang swung his black sickle and suddenly clashed with Jian Wushuang's. Then, they were having close combat. Clash! 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 The continuous clashing sound reverberated in the universe. It was so loud that every clash was deafening. Both Jian Wushuang and universe god Qing Yang's power erupted entirely. Jian Wushuang gave full play to his power and triggered the second layer of power in his blood-killing plate armor. Most importantly, after his Blood Mountain sword integrated with eternal lightning, the power of the Blood Mountain sword increased tremendously. When Jian Wushuang let out his power entirely, his power could be one notch above an ordinary peak universe god in the first heaven. As for universe god Qing Yang, after the black secret pattern surfaced, his divine power erupted entirely and it was not any weaker than Jian Wushuang's. Both their strengths were comparable. Hence, they could only compete on their techniques, swordsmanship, strokes and killing power. But both of them were even competing on their madness. Bang! The loud clash broke out and a corner of the void was broken in the next moment. The speed that both of them fought was extremely quick. The people watching around looked and stunned. Even the universe gods in the second heaven were shocked by the ferocious battle. Fierce. Mad. Terrifying. That battle was hardly seen in 1 billion years within Dayu world. The sky was bellowing while the land was shaking. The battle was really earth-shattering. Chapter 1305, Life and Death. Chapter 1305, Life and Death. Rumble. There was suddenly a rumble in the middle of the training field. It was like lightning but two figures tumbled from the twisted space. Soon, both figures stood steady on their feet. That very moment, the two figures. The luxurious, long robe that universe god Qing Yang was wearing was torn. His hair was messy and his aura was much weaker than before. He looked as though he was in a bind. While Jian Wushuang was covered in scarlet armor. His face was only exposed when he stood straight. However, he looked a little pale then too. There was also blood at the corner of his lips but the intention to fight became extremely vigorous. The spectators saw the scene and gulped a breath of cold air. They could tell how ferocious the fight was. From the result, it seemed that the two of them were equally capable. Jian Wushuang could fight Qing Yang to this point. People from Holy Prefecture, including universe god Jiu Hai and the few experts from Holy Prefecture, creased their eyebrows. They knew clearly that universe god Qing Yang possessed terrifying power and he was definitely unmatched among the universe gods in the first heaven in Dayu world. However, they never expected that Jian Wushuang, who was just a universe master, could push universe god Qing Yang to that state. They originally thought Jian Wushuang would no doubt die in the battle. Many of the others thought so too. But now, no one dared to say so anymore. Whether or not Universe God Qing Yang would win the battle had already become questionable, let alone whether if Universe Qing Yang could kill Jian Wushuang. In the middle of the training field, Jian Wushuang looked at his opponent with his shining eyes. Universe God Qing Yang, your strongest power is just this? Jian Wushuang's voice was cold. He was looking forward to the battle. Even though the power that Universe God Qing Yang displayed was very ferocious and it was far stronger than when he was fighting against Chu Xiao and the others, he still fought a close match. The power that Universe God Qing Yang displayed had yet to force him to his extreme. With such power, it's insufficient. Universe God Qing Yang, you should have a stronger power. Show me. Jian Wushuang roared. In the heated battle earlier, he could tell that Universe God Qing Yang was still holding on to his last card. Universe God Qing Yang, who calmed down in the void, lifted his head and fixed his gaze at Jian Wushuang. There was rage in his eyes. If I'm right, you should still have a stronger force that you have yet to reveal. Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded and admitted directly. If so, we shall decide the victory or defeat with our next stroke. At the same time, it shall decide whether we will be meeting our life or death. Universe God Qing Yang said coldly. Let's do it. Jian Wushuang's eyes were beaming in excitement. A simple exchange of words between the two stirred the emotions among the spectators. The two of them are finally going to decide winning and losing. Not only that, it is going to be life and death too. I wonder who will be the last one standing. The both of them have already displayed such terrifying power. What other measures have they yet to reveal? Countless exclamations were heard. Before, there had definitely been no one who expected Jian Wushuang to win, thinking that he would definitely lose and no doubt, die. However, the pitched battle continued till then and no one dared to make such assumptions anymore. More measures. The master of Dayu Palace and Wucang in the void squinted their eyes and focused. In the middle of the training field. Jian Wushuang, my next move was created after I accumulated 1,000 years of training and followed by 40 years of seclusion cultivation. Its name is Ninth Heaven Crimson Moon. Universe God Qing Yang said coldly. Ninth Heaven Crimson Moon. Jian Wushuang nodded in silence and then gripped the Blood Mountain sword in his hand as he said, the next particular stroke was created in the past 1 year through digestion of accumulated experience from resolving the chess game. Its name is Eternal Light. Hee, let's see if it's my Ninth Heaven Crimson Moon or your Eternal Light that is stronger. Universe God Qing Yang smirked and took a huge stride forward. As everyone held their breath and watched, Universe God Qing Yang took action. He swung the black sickle with both his hands and a vast, surging divine power poured into the sickle. The originally pitch black sickle suddenly turned crimson. Buzz! A cloud of bloody mist filled the air. There had clearly been no deaths in the training field before, and when the bloody mist filled the air, there was a terrifying stench that spread across. That smell was so pungent that it made one sick. In the middle of the bloody mist, Universe God Qing Yang's eyes became bloodshot red too, while his face was distorted. The black sickle that reached the limit of accumulation suddenly slashed. Wow! A radiant red sword light suddenly slashed. The sword light was so swift that it tore the sky and formed a strange arc, just like the moon hanging above the ninth heaven at night. But the moon was a crimson moon. The bloody mist soared up into the sky. The crimson moon hung in the sky with a boundless murderous intention. That was the strongest stroke created by Universe God Qing Yang, who was the #1 genius in Dayu world after 1,000 years of accumulation and 40 years of cultivation in seclusion, Ninth Heaven Crimson Moon. Just as the crimson moon swept down, the master of Dayu Palace and Wucang, who was in the void watching from afar, looked shocked. That is one of the strongest unique skills. The master of Dayu Palace spoke first. It was really the strongest unique skill. Even though it was only a rank 1 strongest unique skill, he's considerably good to have been able to create that. Wutsang nodded faintly. In Eternal Chaotic World, the unique skills of a universe god was categorized into 3 ranks, and every rank would have 3 levels: beginner, advanced and peak. Using the rank 1 unique skill as an example, most of the peak universe gods in the first heaven created peak rank 1 unique skills, but they could only create unique skill of that level. However, there were some exceptions. A real genius with a higher level of comprehension could try to create the rank 1 strongest unique skill. But to create the strongest unique skill, the threshold was extremely high. Not only does one has to have a high level of comprehension and luck, but he also has to be of Tao master level and at least created strongest sword principle. But how many could among Tao masters who could create strongest sword principle? That's why it was rare to see a strongest unique skill. The stroke that universe god Qing Yang slashed was obviously a rank 1 strongest unique skill. After universe god Qing Yang slashed, Jian Wushuang, who stood quietly in the void, suddenly gave out an unprecedented light. He quickly grabbed the Blood Mountain sword and swung fiercely. Swoosh! The sword moved and the sword light flashed. It moved the universe that instant and a terrifying power erupted. A brilliant light that people were intoxicated by lit up the sky. At the moment when the light lit up, the master of Dayu Palace and Wutsang's eyes contracted again. This stroke is also a rank 1 strongest unique skill. Chapter 1306, You Ask for It. Chapter 1306, You Ask for It. Scary Crimson Moon. A brilliant light that symbolized eternity. The 2 rank 1 strongest unique skills collided directly before countless surprised gazes. Bang! The earth shook. The sky lost its color in front of the 2 unique skills. The entire boundless training field was covered by the crimson moon and beautiful eternal light. Rumble. Another deafening rumble was heard. Everyone surrounding the border of the training field was left dumbfounded. Even though there was quite a distance between them and the core of the training field, they could still feel the terrifying power of the 2 unique skills. The 2 people in the pitched battle were a peak universe god in the first heaven while the other one was a universe master. But the power that was given out from the collision between the 2 was enough to astonish all the universe gods in the first heaven. Even universe gods in the second heaven didn't dare to belittle them. Crack! 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 The void continuously cracked as the terrifying crimson moon and the brilliant eternal light clashed ferociously together at the core of the training field. The 2 of them gave full play to their strongest unique skill and they are so well matched. They are well matched. The power of the unique skills that they created are very similar. Cool. This is a competition of endurance. The surrounding spectators marveled at the sight. They saw that although the direct collision of 2 unique skills caused an earth-shattering effect, they couldn't determine a win or loss, but they were in a stalemate situation. Yes. It's a stalemate. Jian Wushuang's gaze was cold while the surging power raged towards the sword continuously. His Blood Mountain sword was trembling vigorously as it gave out terrifying power. As for universe god Qing Yang, he was clenching his teeth, his face was distorted and divine power all over his body was pouring down. The 2 of them were giving their all to pull off their strongest stroke, but no one could crush the other person directly. Then, the 2 of them were playing an endurance game. They were competing who could resist longer, who was more extensive. A universe master and a universe god in the first heaven to compete on their strength and resistance, it was obviously not going to work. However, Jian Wushuang was no ordinary universe master, he had done inverse cultivation. The strength of inverse cultivation was fundamentally stronger. The most important part was that King of Venomous Worms existed in Jian Wushuang's body. King of Venomous Worms had been recovering his soul power quickly. He was not afraid of competing for endurance. Rumble. 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 The 2 strong forces charged forward again and again. The longer they pushed, the bigger the expense of power. Universe God Qing Yang had blood at the corner of his lips, but his face revealed insanity. How is it possible? I am a peak universe god in the first heaven. How could I not win against a universe master? Impossible, I won't believe this. Universe God Qing Yang looked ferocious, just like a raging beast. His eyes were flashing with anger too. He wasn't willing to believe, but the truth was before him. He lost an enormous amount of divine power after such a mad collusion. He already couldn't continue. On the other hand, Jian Wushuang, who was opposite him, was still fierce and strong and obviously hadn't reached his limit yet. If the situation were to persist, he would definitely lose the battle. I fight this battle to show Lord Wuzang. I want to receive Lord Wuzang's recognition. I want to go to Snow Dojo. Jian Wushuang should be just a stepping stone for me to prove my ability. I, Qing Yang, how could I be defeated by a stepping stone? I can't lose. I can't lose. Universe God Qing Yang was twinkling with an unprecedented madness, and he was roaring from the bottom of his heart. The next moment he thought of an idea, flipped his hand, and there was a cinnabar elixir that appeared. Looking at the cinnabar elixir, there was a flash of coldness in Universe God Qing Yang's eyes. He didn't hesitate to take the elixir straight away. All the spectator was shocked at the sight. He ate the elixir. In a one-to-one battle, he had an elixir. The elixir just now seems to be blood coagulating elixir. Blood coagulating elixir. The moment the elixir's name was exclaimed, everyone was taken by surprise. Blood coagulating elixir was an elixir that took on one's blood as an expense in order to increase their power tremendously in a short period of time. If a universe god in the first heaven were to consume blood coagulating elixir, he could normally increase his power by 30%. If the price wasn't huge, the increased power wouldn't be vast as well. If it were to be a war, it's natural for Universe God Qing Yang to take a blood coagulating elixir. However, it was a one-to-one battle that was happening before everyone's eyes. Even if he won the battle, it was because his power increased with the aid of elixir but not his own power. He had a blood coagulate elixir. Such a low trick. Universe God Qing Yang is so shameless. Everyone was raging. The master of Deyu Palace and Wuzang, who were in the void above too, creased their eyebrows. Universe God Qing Yang, who had blood coagulate elixir, suddenly increased in divine power, and the huge crimson moon that originally couldn't hold on suddenly became stronger too. Jian Wushuang, die. Universe God Qing Yang bellowed, and his hysterical voice reverberated in the universe. The huge crimson moon rumbled, and there was a tremendous power and surged over. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's brilliant eternal light retreated. Jian Wushuang felt the pressing power and his face grew grave. Universe God Qing Yang, you asked for it. Jian Wushuang's eyes were washed with murderous intention. The moment he let out a bellow, the power of star that was hidden in his body suddenly surged. The secret skills of Star Palace suddenly erupted. The secret skills of Star Palace had always been Jian Wushuang's trump card. Plus, due to the first volume of the secret skills of Star Palace, his power of star could be accumulated again. The previous time he played the secret skills of Star Palace was to kill the Jin Kingdom monarch, Jin Feng. It had been many years. His secret skills of Star Palace could have been used again long ago. However, if it wasn't necessary, he didn't use the technique easily. Then, Universe God Qing Yang took a blood coagulating elixir and wanted to kill him with the aid of the elixir. That triggered his anger. He carried out the secret skills of Star Palace and integrated the power of stars into his sword principle. Then, the power of the retreating eternal light suddenly increased by tenfold. One must know that Jian Wushuang and Universe God Qing Yang were evenly matched. Universe God Qing Yang only increased his power of Crimson Moon by 30% with the aid of the elixir, while Jian Wushuang increased his power by tenfold after he carried out the secret skills of Star Palace. 30% versus tenfold. That was a vast difference. Rumble. The huge, resplendent crimson moon collapsed directly. There was no space for a struggle, but it shattered easily like dead wood. While the brilliant eternal light continued to expand and drowned the entire body of Universe God Qing Yang. No! Universe God Qing Yang bellowed tragically and vanished into thin air the very next second. Chapter 1307, Omen. Chapter 1307, Omen. Boom! The two appalling powers in the center of the battlefield finally dissipated. Everything in the world finally came back into peace. But the crowd around the battlefield remained in a dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Almost everyone stood wide-eyed, filled with horror, and apparently they had not yet recovered from what they had seen. When the crowd saw Qingyang Universe God swallow the scarlet elixir in the final battle, they thought that Jian Wushuang was sure to die. Even Scarlet Island Master intended to give him a hand, though it was too late. However, the situation totally subverted expectation. Unexpectedly, Qingyang Universe God, who enhanced his power by taking advantage of elixirs, was instantly killed by Jian Wushuang. Instantly, without an opportunity to resist. What on earth kinds of tricks does he use? Everyone kept staring at Jian Wushuang in disbelief. Now people had all witnessed how Jian Wushuang killed Qingyang Universe God. They remained wide-eyed in horror while one person became outraged. Jian Wushuang. A roar resounded, full of anger and aggression. At that moment, an aged figure rushed out. This frightening aged figure was apparently stronger than Jian Wushuang and Qingyang Universe God. He rushed toward Jian Wushuang, intending to kill him, but he was held back by another figure. Bastard! The aged figure was the Universe God of the Nine Oceans. He shouted, bristling with rage. Universe God of the Nine Oceans, what the hell are you doing? It was Scarlet Island Master who stopped the Universe God of the Nine Oceans. The Master, also with a murderous look, could easily suppress the Universe God of the Nine Oceans with his power. Although Universe God of the Nine Oceans was one of the four masters in the Holy Prefecture, only the most powerful master there, not him, could contain the Scarlet Island Master. Universe God of the Nine Oceans, only a primary Universe God in the second heaven, meant nothing to Scarlet Island Master. Universe God of the Nine Oceans, here is Dayu Palace and the Palace Master is also present. You should know how to behave yourself. White Sector God from Dayu Palace also came out to control the situation. Hearing the words, Universe God of Nine Oceans changed his attitude and respectfully said to Dayu Palace Master in the distance, Your Majesty, my disciple Qingyang was killed by Jian Wushuang. Please help me call for the justice. Justice? The Dayu Palace Master glanced at Universe God of Nine Oceans and sneered, Don't speak such a barefaced lie. Universe God of Nine Oceans was surprised by the response he received. Humph. Death and injuries are inevitable in such a fierce battle. Moreover, it's your disciple who asked for the battle and even took the elixirs in order to kill Jian Wushuang. So why shouldn't Jian Wushuang kill him? Dayu Palace Master said indifferently. The crowd also cast a taunting glance at Universe God of Nine Oceans. They witnessed everything and could judge the situation fairly. Qingyang Jieshan shamelessly took the elixirs in the battle in order to kill Jian Wushuang, so it was fair that Jian Wushuang killed him for self-defense. After all, they weren't fools. The face of Universe God of Nine Oceans went pale. He knew that he and the Holy Prefecture should accept the facts, even though he was unwilling to do so. Everyone was on the side of Jian Wushuang. And here was Dayu Palace, with its master was present. He could do nothing but contain his own anger. Jian Wushuang. Frustrated, he glanced at Jian Wushuang with his indifferent and murderous eyes. But this time, he was shocked. As was anyone else who looked at Jian Wushuang. It was because they found that Jian Wushuang completely ignored Universe God of Nine Oceans despite the extreme anger and murderous look of the latter. Instead, he was looking up at the heaven above him, with an unprecedentedly serious expression. From the heavens came a low hum, accompanied by an annihilatory power. All the crowd were shocked, with eyes wide open when they saw the scene. That is. This annihilatory power. It is a god test. Exactly, it's a god test. Oh my god. Everyone almost got shocked. It was unbelievable that Jian Wushuang had immediately ushered in his important god test right after he had killed Qingyang Universe God through a hard battle. God test right after a fierce fight. What a coincidence. Even Dayu Palace Master and Lord Wuzong could hardly believe what they had seen and frowned. Generally speaking, a cultivating practitioner could feel the coming of the god test a long time before its arrival, and he could even predict the exact date because the suggestion was so clear and obvious. But now, the god test of Jian Wushuang came suddenly without a sign. If there had been one, Jian Wushuang would never have chosen to fight with Qingyang Universe God. The heavens kept humming. And the universe suddenly darkened. And in the heavens, large dark clouds gathered, in the depth of which violent forces were brewing. Everyone could feel the horrible pressure of the dark clouds. Suffocating. The pressure. Feeling the pressure, Dayu Palace Master and Lord Wuzong realized something, and their expression changed again. No, this is not a god test. Dayu Palace Master said. You are right. The pressure is accumulating, there is no sign of it coming immediately. Wuzong added. These two prestigious universe gods from the third heaven looked at each other, saying the same word. Omen. Now even these two prominent figures expressed a hint of fear. Indeed, the omen before the coming of the god test. Dayu Palace Master took a deep breath and solemnly said, all cultivating practitioners will embrace an omen before the arrival of the god test, which serves as an indicator to practitioners. However, in the eternal chaotic world, the omen came as a feeling to most of the practitioners. But Jian Wushuang's omen formed into thunderclouds. A thundercloud with such a horrible pressure. Chapter 1308, The Descending Test. Chapter 1308, The Descending Test. It isn't God's test but a signifier of a descending test. The signifier formed into thunderclouds. Oh God! Everyone on the training field quickly came back to reality and exclaimed one after another. Most of them had undergone God's test, but they had only received some strange sensation before their God's test came by. However, the signifier of Jian Wushuang's god test had taken the shape of such terrifying thunderclouds. Until his god tests descended, how strong would it become? Terrifying. Everyone was terrified. It is said that someone too smart dies young. Those geniuses, the better they are, the more ferocious the god's test that they encounter. Jian Wushuang was extremely gifted, and one like him is rare to come by. Hence, the god's test that he would face would definitely be scary, Wuzong mumbled to himself in the void. Ha, Jian Wushuang, even God couldn't tolerate with you. Universe God in the 9 oceans laughed hysterically and mischievously, even the signifier of your god's test has already taken the shape of thunderclouds. I have never heard of that before. When the real god's test comes, it would definitely be earth-shaking. Aren't you extremely talented? Your power as a mere universe master, no one universe god in the first heaven in Dayu world could win against you. As you are so great, I'd like to see how are you going to pass the upcoming god's test. Universe god in the 9 oceans was extremely angry earlier. Universe god Qing Yang died before him after all, but he couldn't do anything. Then, he felt much better. From the signs, he could tell Jian Wushuang was going to deal with an extremely terrifying god's test. Dealing with such a terrifying god's test, Jian Wushuang had almost no hope of surviving. On the training field, everyone came back to reality from their astonishment. They fixed their gazes on Jian Wushuang but remained silent. Jian Wushuang was the center of attention, but he didn't look worried. As for the mischievous laugh of Universe God in the 9 oceans, he wasn't concerned about him either. His eyes were fixed on the thundercloud above him. There was a terrifying pressure among the thundercloud. It didn't go away but lingered in the sky for a very long time. From the thunderclouds, Jian Wushuang received a message. 120 years later. Jian Wushuang muttered softly. The sign of God's test had come, and it would provide the cultivator a time frame for them to prepare themselves. Although Jian Wushuang was going to undertake inverse cultivation test, it was the same. The time given for him to prepare for the inverse cultivation test was 120 years. It's too short. King of Venomous Worms' voice sounded very depressed in Jian Wushuang's body. In ordinary cultivation, most of them would have a few centuries to prepare for God's test, or even longer. Hence, 120 years was fairly short. It is really not long, but I can at least prepare myself in time. Jian Wushuang clenched his fist. Rumble. The thunder sound continued to be heard, but the thundercloud that lingered above the void for a very long time finally started to disperse, and the terrifying pressure that covered the sky gradually dispersed too. Very soon, everywhere became calm and resumed its original state. Jian Wushuang reined in his gaze. He stood on the ground with his eyebrows tightly creased. He seemed to be muttering to himself. He did that for a while, then he lifted his head. He took a step and stood before the master of Dayu Palace and Wuzang. Palace Master, I have a presumptuous request. I wish you would consent. Jian Wushuang spoke politely. Go ahead. The master of Dayu Palace looked Jian Wushuang in the eyes. My God's test will be here in 120 years. The place that I will undergo the God's test, I'd like it to be a tribunal passing pinnacle. I wonder if it's okay, Jian Wushuang asked. Of course, the master of Dayu Palace nodded. Tribunal passing pinnacle is a designated place for undergoing God's test. Whoever that passes their God's test there would be beneficial for Dayu Palace. After all, the inner disciples of Dayu Palace can watch by the side to accumulate more experience, especially when a genius like you is undergoing God's test. It's a chance that is hard to come by. Focus on passing the God's test. When you undergo God's test, I'll personally watch over it, and there'll definitely be no one who can disturb you. Thank you. Jian Wushuang expressed his gratitude. Regardless of if he was undergoing God's test or the inverse cultivation test, the most important facet in going through God's test was to not be disturbed by external factors. Then, there was deep-seated grudge between him and Holy Prefecture. If he were to undergo God's test in other places, he was worried that the other experts from Holy Prefecture would make trouble when he underwent the God's test. But in Dayu Palace, there was the master of Dayu Palace who would attend personally. Hence, no one would dare to act recklessly. In other words, no one could affect him. Then, he could undergo his God's test with his all. One more thing, Jian Wushuang looked at the master of Dayu Palace and continued, the reason why I could improve so tremendously in power in the 1 years is because of the 10 years accumulation from the Little Scattered Stars game. If possible, I'd like another chance to resolve the chess game. If there's any condition or price that I have to pay, you can be straightforward with me and I'll try my best to fulfill. Jian Wushuang said in all sincerity. If it was before, he wouldn't have had the nerve to request a chance even if he was willing to pay a price. However, inverse cultivation test was coming and Jian Wushuang felt the increase of pressure. At such a crucial moment, he would like to improve his power as much as possible. The Little Scattered Stars game was really helpful for him. He, of course, wanted to obtain it with his all. Hearing what Jian Wushuang said, the master of Dayu Palace smiled faintly and said, although the Little Scattered Stars game is in my hand and Wuzang would study it with me occasionally, it isn't much help to the two of us. It doesn't matter if we lend it to you for 120 years. You are my guest. You can use the resources in Dayu Palace as you wish. Dayu Palace has treasure and elixir that could assist you in passing God's test. Of course, you have to use treasure of the same value in exchange for the treasure. Besides, the Blaze Quicksand Gourd that I borrowed from you earlier, I'd return it to you before you undergo your God's test too. Thank you, Palace Master. Jian Wushuang thanked him again. The master of Dayu Palace waved. Jian Wushuang. There was suddenly a deep voice, and the owner of the voice was Wutsang, who was seated next to the master of Dayu Palace. Lord Wutsang, Jian Wushuang immediately looked over. You are extremely gifted. I have come across many geniuses from wandering around Snow Kingdom over the years, but there is hardly anyone who could compare favorably with you. I hope you will pass the God's test. Wutsang looked at Jian Wushuang as he announced. If you were to pass through the God's test, I will pass you a token and recommend you into Snow Dojo. There are countless geniuses and Dayu world is beyond compare. When you're there, your potential could be put to full play. Chapter 1309, Defense Secret Skills. Chapter 1309, Defense Secret Skills. Snow Dojo. Jian Wushuang was quite interested. He had heard of this place, knowing that it was a camp for the geniuses of Snow Kingdom, in which there were far more geniuses than Dayu Universe. The Snow Kingdom is quite large, and Snow Dojo is also a good place for you now, though it isn't as good as the Lineage of Stars. The King of Venomous Worms said in Jian Wushuang's heart. I know, but I should consider it after I finish my inverse cultivation test. Jian Wushuang said solemnly. And soon he left. And the people also left. And the battle came to an end. Jian Wushuang defeated and killed Qingyang Universe God, which was unexpected by the crowd at the beginning. However, the topic that people talked about after the battle was not that Qingyang Universe God was killed by Jian Wushuang, but that Jian Wushuang would go through his God test in 120 years. Everyone was very curious about how powerful the God test could be with such an astonishing omen. Could Jian Wushuang pass his God test in 120 years? Jian Wushuang sat alone in the secret room, with the little scattered stars game in his front. The King of Venomous Worms, within the body of Jian Wushuang, said to him, the inverse cultivation test is the same as God test, in which defense abilities and life-saving skills are even more important than the swordsmanship itself. So in the next 120 years you should seek to improve different abilities rather than only polishing your swordsmanship. I know. Jian Wushuang nodded. Before focusing on the little scattered stars game, I will first improve my defense ability and life-saving skills. And the first step to develop defense ability is to cultivate defense secret skills. Actually, Jian Wushuang had cultivated a kind of defense secret skill. That was the golden secret skill from Green Fire Palace. Green Fire Palace, serving as a huge battlefield and a large treasure deposit, owned many secret skills with high levels, including the gold secret skill, which was enough for universe gods in the first heaven and the second heaven. The gold secret skill was divided into 3 parts. Only cultivating practitioners above Tianzuan were qualified to practice the first part. As for the second part, only universe gods in the first heaven were qualified. Jian Wushuang had only finished the first part. Now, in order to improve his defense ability of the body, it was imperative for him to practice the second part. Actually, I have tried to cultivate the second part for several times but failed. Now, although I have developed my overall strength a lot, my magical power hasn't improved enough. I think it would be quite difficult for me to achieve that goal. Yep, quite difficult for you currently, but if you can get some natural treasures and a sacred bone elixir, and then combine them with your magic power, you can probably finish the second part, said the King of Venomous Worms. Sacred bone elixir. Jian Wushuang was confused. That is a kind of elixir that forcibly enhances the magic power in a short time. If used properly, it can help you cultivate the second part of the gold secret skills. The King of Venomous Worms smiled. As the guest of Dayu Palace, why not use the resources here? You can ask members of the palace for sacred bone elixirs or ask them to find some for you if there aren't here. Precious as it is, the elixir isn't difficult to find in such a big and powerful Dayu Palace. Well, let me ask them right now. Jian Wushuang immediately sent a message to White Sector God. And White Sector God replied soon. There were more than 1 sacred bone elixirs right here in the palace. White Sector God immediately asked his subordinates to send 2 sacred bone elixirs to Jian Wushuang, who also paid numerous chaotic crystals. With sacred bone elixirs in hand, Jian Wushuang started to cultivate the gold secret skill under the guidance of the King of Venomous Worms. The cultivation took 3 years. After 3 years, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes in the secret room, with his body shaking and producing a cracking sound. Done! Jian Wushuang was extremely excited. With the help of sacred bone elixirs and the guidance of the King of Venomous Worms, Jian Wushuang spent 3 years completing the second part of the gold secret skill. Thanks to the cultivation, Jian Wushuang's already incomparable magic power soared again and reached a new level. I feel that my current magic power is at least 10 times stronger than before. Jian Wushuang said. His former power was equal to an ordinary universe god in the first heaven, and now, he was powerful enough to easily match a peak universe god in the first heaven. It was incredible for a universe god to make such achievements. What's more, the most powerful skills that Jian Wushuang had was not magic power but the blood-killing plate armor. The blood-killing plate armor shared a great reputation in the eternal chaotic world, because it could weaken the power of a universe god by 90%. With the blood-killing plate armor, plus his soaring magic power as well as his defense ability, Jian Wushuang was definitely able to compete with average universe gods in the second heaven. However, what Jian Wushuang was facing was the inverse cultivation test. The most terrible god test in the eternal chaotic world. Jian Wushuang believed that his current defense ability was not yet enough for him to get through the test. So he went to the treasure deposit of Dayu Palace. He wanted to pick a suitable defense treasure, just like the black turtle shell that Dong Men Universe God had used in his god test. The black turtle shell was a very powerful defense treasure, which Dong Men Universe God relied on to resist the second sacred thunder. Unfortunately, that thunder also carried a trace of fire test, which resulted in his death. To avoid the same situation and get through the inverse cultivation test, Jian Wushuang should make full preparation. And a suitable defense treasure could help him improve the success possibility. Finally, Jian Wushuang decided to choose a treasure called Green Bell. Ordinary as it was, the Green Bell was more powerful than the Black Turtle. In order to get the bell, Jian Wushuang paid a lot. Chapter 1310, Lineage of Scarlet. Chapter 1310, Lineage of Scarlet. In the dark green bell, there were 2 secret skills. First, Immovable Mountain, which was used as a defense. The other one was used for suppression. However, the Blood Mountain sword possessed suppression power. Hence, the secret skill of suppression wasn't much help to Jian Wushuang. After Jian Wushuang obtained the dark green bell, he stayed in the secret room to study the defense secret skill. Just as he mastered the defense secret skill, he received a message from the Master of Scarlet Island. Jian Wushuang, quickly return to Scarlet Island. The Master of Scarlet Island only told him to make a trip back to the island, but he didn't mention what happened. I am going all out to prepare for the upcoming inverse cultivation test, and the island master surely knows this too. If it wasn't about anything important, he definitely wouldn't bother me. Jian Wushuang was very certain about it. The Master of Scarlet Island knew and he still called for him, so it must be urgent. Jian Wushuang didn't delay but immediately left to go back to the Scarlet Island. Jian Wushuang arrived at Scarlet Island very quickly and met the Master of Scarlet Island. In the lofty palace, there was another person besides Jian Wushuang and the Master of Scarlet Island. He was a skinny elderly with white eyebrows. The elderly with white eyebrows had very long brows that were almost reaching his ear lobes. Jian Wushuang, let me introduce you. This is Master Uncle Tianing, the Master of Scarlet Island introduced. Master Uncle. Jian Wushuang stunned. He once obtained the most detailed information about Scarlet Island, but it had never been brought up that there was a Master Uncle of the Island Master. The aura of the Master Uncle was extremely tough, not any weaker as compared to the Master of Scarlet Island. He obviously was a peak universe god in the second heaven as well. However, Jian Wushuang had never heard the name Tian Ying before this. It seems that the master of Scarlet Island ain't as simple as he looks, Jian Wushuang complimented. However, it is only right and proper. He has been an overlord in Daiyu world for so many years, how could he be as simple as he looks? Jian Wushuang thought and bowed before the elderly with white eyebrows for the first time. Universe God Tian Ying, greetings from Jian Wushuang. The elderly with white eyebrows waved. I cultivate in seclusion all year round and I had no idea that a prodigy like you had appeared in Scarlet Island. Universe God Tian Ying looked at Jian Wushuang with admiration. He had been in seclusion all the time. He only received the message from the master of Scarlet Island not long ago and found out about the existence of Jian Wushuang. He had also heard of Jian Wushuang's achievements. A universe master killed the strongest genius of Daiyu world, universe god Qin Yang, who stood high above all universe gods in the first heaven. The achievement was simply astonishing. Judging merely on the signs of the upcoming god's test which had taken the shape of pressuring thunderclouds, that sight itself was unbelievable. Both incidents clearly showed that Jian Wushuang was a monster through and through. Jian Wushuang, I called you here today for just one matter, the master of Scarlet Island said. Jian Wushuang looked at the master of Scarlet Island. While the master of Scarlet Island exchanged a look with universe god Tian Ying next to him and smiled, I've discussed in detail with Master Uncle. We finally came to a decision for you to join the lineage of Scarlet. Lineage of Scarlet? Jian Wushuang stunned. He only knew about Scarlet Island, but what was the lineage of Scarlet? The master of Scarlet Island wasn't surprised when he saw Jian Wushuang in confusion. He explained, Jian Wushuang, you might not know that the core of the Scarlet Island is actually the lineage of Scarlet. However, there are not many experts in the lineage of Scarlet in Scarlet Island. For instance, the real lineage of Scarlet in the Scarlet Island are in fact now only Master Uncle and I. Is that so? Jian Wushuang was convinced. The master of Scarlet Island continued, Scarletion is founded by an expert above all the universe gods. He was once outstanding but he declined later on. Until now, he has only existed in Daiyu world. The lineage of Scarlet has been passed down until now and there is an extraordinary secret skill. It's called Scarlet Kingdom. Scarlet Kingdom. Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted. He immediately recalled a message that he had once read. The three overlords in Daiyu world, including Scarlet Island, Golden Sun Sect and Holy Prefecture, although they were roughly the same in power, the strongest among the three overlords was definitely the master of Scarlet Island. As for the master of Golden Sun Sect and Holy Prefecture, although they were peak universe gods in the second heaven, they were one notch below the master of Scarlet Island in power. The reason was because the master of Scarlet Island gained fame through Scarlet Kingdom. That technique was a very ferocious secret skill. For the technique to be put to full play by a peak universe god in the second heaven like the master of Scarlet Island, it was even scarier. Jian Wushuang, do you want to cultivate the Scarlet Kingdom? The master of Scarlet Island looked at Jian Wushuang. Cultivate the Scarlet Kingdom. Jian Wushuang stared. The Scarlet Kingdom was the technique that made the master of Scarlet Island infamous. It was extremely fierce. He, of course, would love to cultivate such a secret skill. But, why would the master of Scarlet Island pass on the secret skill to him so easily? Jian Wushuang, you are extremely gifted. If you were to pass the god's test, you would definitely have a bright future. However, the god's test isn't ordinary. There's a limit to how much I can help. The only thing that I could help you with, I reckon, would be the secret skill, Scarlet Kingdom, the master of Scarlet Island explained. However, Scarlet Kingdom is lineage of Scarlet's most important secret skill after all. Only members of the lineage of Scarlet are qualified to cultivate the skill. I've discussed with Master Uncle. If you were to agree to join us as a lineage of Scarlet, I can lead you to cultivate this secret skill. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands together. Even though he was tempted, Jian Wushuang replied honestly, Island Master, to be frank, I will leave Dayu World for Snow Dojo after passing the God's test. Or maybe I will wander in other vast places. Hence, even if I become Lineage of Scarlet, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to contribute much to the Lineage of Scarlet. The Master of Scarlet Island and Universe God Tianing smiled when they heard his reply. The Master of Scarlet Island replied, Jian Wushuang, don't you worry, we Lineage of Scarlet do not restrain experts under our command. If you were to become Lineage of Scarlet, you could still do whatever that you wish. Even if you are away all year round, it wouldn't be a problem. In the Lineage of Scarlet's history, there were a few who were the island masters before me, who wandered on their own for years after they found a suitable successor. But, there's only one condition. If the Lineage of Scarlet were to be in a life and death situation one day, I will signal an SOS and I hope you will be able to come back in time to provide assistance. Chapter 1311, Interpreting. Chapter 1311, Interpreting. No restrictions except having to come back to save Scarlet Island once a crisis happens. Without much hesitation, Jian Wushuang nodded, yes. The only condition was absolutely acceptable to him. Even if he did not join the Lineage of Scarlet, he would definitely offer a hand whenever the island met with a crisis. After all, it was the first place that welcomed him after he entered the eternal chaotic world, and the island master was very kind to him. That's the deal. Scarlet Island Master smiled. Tianing Universe God who was near the master took out a command token to give to Jian Wushuang, drip a drop of blood to it and you will become a member of the Lineage of Scarlet. Jian Wushuang glanced at the command token with his soul power, nodded, and dripped a drop of blood into it. Scarlet Island Master smiled, welcome. From now on, just call me Brother He Yuan, as we are both from Lineage of Scarlet. Brother He Yuan. Hearing the real name of Scarlet Island Master for the first time, Jian Wushuang felt a little bit awkward. Now, I will take you to the cultivating place of Scarlet Kingdom. Scarlet Island Master took Jian Wushuang to the core place of the Lineage of Scarlet. The place was over 10,000 miles below the Scarlet City. Right in this place sat a tremendous palace, hidden by an advanced forbidden token. Ordinary gods, including universe gods in the third heaven, could not find it. Jian Wushuang followed Scarlet Island Master and Tianing Universe God, and came to a wide square in the palace. In the middle of the square, there was a stone monument with ancient words written on it. Each of these words was magical and grand. The stone monument was left by the founder of our Lineage of Scarlet. The powerful descendants all depend on them to interpret the secret skills of Scarlet Kingdom. Scarlet Island Master said. Jian Wushuang looked at the stone monument in front of him, feeling amazed. He knew how extraordinary it was. The material, for example, was unknown by Jian Wushuang. Interesting. The king of venomous worms in the body of Jian Wushuang said, this stone monument is made up of ancient magic crystals, which are precious in the eternal chaotic world. Such a huge piece of ancient magic crystal must be invaluable. And the founder of Lineage of Scarlet used it just to record the secret skills. It is too luxurious even though the lineage is powerful. It feels like the founder of the Lineage of Scarlet had very extraordinary power. On what level? Jian Wushuang asked. I can't tell from just an ancient magic crystal monument. But no matter how powerful it was, the founder lagged far behind the founder of the Lineage of Stars. The king of venomous worms said. Doubtless. Jian Wushuang replied. After all, the Lineage of Stars was among the top ones in the 10 cultivation sanctuaries. If the founder of the Lineage of Scarlet had been powerful enough to be compared with the founder of the Lineage of Stars, the Lineage of Scarlet wouldn't only stay in a small universe like this. The secret skills of the Scarlet Kingdom are divided into 4 parts. Even the simplest part is very difficult to interpret. I spent 3,000 years in front of the monument to figure out the first part and I still can't interpret the second one. You are more talented than me but your time is limited. So you should seize the time and try to interpret the first part. It is enough to finish the first part. As for the next 3 parts, you can work on finishing them until you pass your god test. Scarlet Island Master said. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded. Then we will leave you alone to stay here to interpret. Remember to keep track of the time. Scarlet Island Master reminded Jian Wushuang again and left with Tian Jia Universe God. After they left, Jian Wushuang immediately sat down. His soul power instantly covered the entire monument, and he could clearly see what was hidden within the monument. Then he began to meticulously interpret it. After only 3 days, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes. Well? What happened? Jian Wushuang frowned. Why did I spend just 3 days to interpret the first part while Brother He Yuan used 3,000 years? Jian Wushuang was confused. When he heard about what Scarlet Island Master said, he felt that it was not easy to interpret the secret skill of Scarlet Kingdom. But unexpectedly, he just took 3 days. With another 2 days, he could even interpret all the 4 parts of the skills. How come? Jian Wushuang was still puzzled. At this time, the King of Venomous Worms gave him an answer. Scarlet Island Master said it was difficult based on his own intelligence and capability. First of all, he is far less intelligent to you. More importantly, it is because you have ignited the soul fire. This stone is made of ancient magic crystal, which makes obstacles in people's consciousness. Therefore, people covering this monument with consciousness find it hard to see all the hidden things. I guess the founder of the lineage of stars deliberately set this obstacle in order to test the intelligence of his descendants. Although you don't have enough magic power, you are doing inverse cultivation and you have ignited the soul fire, which covers this monument and offsets the obstacles for you. So it is much easier for you to interpret. In this way, you easily outpaced Scarlet Island Master. Jian Wushuang fully understood and felt amazed by his power. The powerful inverse cultivation facilitated the soul power and ignited the soul fire, contributing to incomparable advantages for Jian Wushuang. The next 3 secret skills won't take long for me to finish, I think. Jian Wushuang smiled and then continued to interpret. Chapter 13:12, Scarlet Kingdom. Chapter 13:12, Scarlet Kingdom. Jian Wushuang understood the first level of Scarlet Kingdom in 3 days. Although the following second, third, and fourth levels of the secret skill were more difficult than the first, Jian Wushuang found it rather easy to understand. A year passed by very quickly. Before the steel, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and a bright light swept out. Viroom. A terrifying crimson flame surged and formed a huge scarlet sea fire which filled the universe. Jian Wushuang was right in the core of the scarlet sea fire. The surrounding crimson flame that filled the air was submitted to him and he became the ruler of the scarlet sea fire. Such a strong power. This is Scarlet Kingdom. It feels rather similar to realm techniques. Jian Wushuang looked around in astonishment. However, Scarlet Kingdom was different from realm techniques after all. Realm techniques were a great technique to suppress opponents and weaken their power. But Scarlet Kingdom wouldn't pressure the opponent. Even when the opponent was right in the core of sea fire, he wouldn't be affected much. However, Jian Wushuang who was in the sea fire would be able to perform stronger swordsmanship. Among the scarlet sea fire that filled the air, Jian Wushuang stood up and the Blood Mountain sword was already in his hands. Jian Wushuang wielded the sword and there was immediately a bolt of lightning. An explosion of terrifying power, and there was immediately a twisted black hole in the scarlet sea fire. The power, Jian Wushuang was beaming with joy. He could clearly sense the tremendous increment of his power in swordsmanship. The increment was about 70% more. 70% was already quite significant. No wonder even though the Master of Golden Sun Sect and Holy Prefecture are both universe gods in the second heaven but they couldn't win against the Master of Scarlet Island. It is because the Master of Scarlet Island possesses the secret skill of Scarlet Kingdom, and the moment he carries out the secret skill, his overall power would increase by 70% straightway. And, merely the first level could be so strong. The following second, third, and fourth, would only be stronger. Jian Wushuang gasped with admiration. Of course, although he understood all 4 levels of the secret skill, he could only really perform the first level of the secret skill. As for the second level of Scarlet Kingdom, maybe he could only be qualified to perform it after he become a universe god when he passed the inverse cultivation test. With Scarlet Kingdom, my overall power increased tremendously again. I am even more confident to pass the inverse cultivation test. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands tightly together. After he understood all 4 levels of the secret skill, he didn't continue to stay but got up to leave. When he arrived outside the cave dwelling, Jian Wushuang saw the Master of Scarlet Island and Universe God Tianning that were waiting outside. Sorry to keep you waiting, Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Jian Wushuang. The Master of Scarlet Island and Universe God Tianning were both shocked to see Jian Wushuang. You came out so quickly. How long has it been? From what the Master of Scarlet Island and Universe God Tianning said, even though Jian Wushuang was extremely gifted, it would require at least 10 years' time to understand the first level of Scarlet Kingdom. But it had only been a year. You have mastered the first level secret skill? The Master of Scarlet Island asked in disbelief. Yes, Jian Wushuang smiled faintly, not only have I understood the first level, but I've also understood the latter 3 levels too. 4 levels of secret skill, you understood them all. The Master of Scarlet Island and Universe God Tianning stared. Understood all 4 levels of secret skill in 1 year? How is it possible? The Master of Scarlet Island was astonished. One must know that he himself had spent almost 3,000 years on only understanding the first level of secret skill, and he had yet to understand the second level of secret skill until then. Jian Wushuang understood all 4 levels of secret skill in 1 year? Merely a year. We were all human, why are we so different? Monster. The Master of Scarlet Island and Universe God Tianning looked at each other in surprise and could only describe Jian Wushuang with that particular word. Jian Wushuang, the most impressive thing about the Scatlition was the secret skill, Scarlet Kingdom. It is also the only thing that we could help you with. The rest of the things depend on yourself, the Master of Scarlet Island said. Jian Wushuang nodded heavily. He was very clear that understanding Scarlet Kingdom really did increase his power quite a bit. But even with the secret skill, he still couldn't undergo the inverse cultivation test with no worries. He still had to get ready. He still had to continue to increase his power. He focused on increasing his level of swordsmanship. Jian Wushuang returned to where he had stayed in Dayu Palace. In the secret room, the little scattered stars game was before Jian Wushuang and he started studying and resolving it again. He resolved 35 moves the previous time and then he continued to resolve the chess game from 36th move onwards. Then, he obviously had more time compared to the previous time. Viroom. The scene fast-forwarded. Again, there was a boundless land covered in white. At the far front of the land, there was a figure in a white robe standing there. The moment Jian Wushuang saw the white robe, the figure withdrew his long sword and charged towards Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang couldn't feel the existence of any sword principle, but he could merely depend on his understanding towards nature of swordsmanship to resolve the problem before him. While Jian Wushuang was resolving it, he continued to accumulate experience like before. He immersed himself in resolving the little scattered stars game. As time flew past, the little scattered stars game was extremely profound and every 33 steps marked a threshold. Under normal situation, a universe god in the first heaven of a top genius level could spend 10 years and resolve the 33rd move. However, every move after that represented a level higher. In a 20-year time period, one might not even resolve the 40th move, and in 100 years. one might only be wandering around over 40 moves. Jian Wushuang started resolving from the 36th move and he spent 100 years on the chess set. After 100 years, the 51st black chess gradually disappeared from the little scattered stars game before Jian Wushuang. The 51st move was resolved. Until then, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes. The 51st move is finally resolved, Jian Wushuang sighed, in 100 years, from the 35th move to the 51st move. I only resolved 16 moves. Jian Wushuang wasn't pleased with the outcome. However, King of Venomous Worms who was in his body spoke, Jian Wushuang, you think the little scattered stars game is easy? Don't forget that to you, just a universe master, this is too high of a level. To be able to resolve the 51st move in 100 years' time, it's incredibly good. How dare you dream for more? True that, Jian Wushuang smiled, it's nearer to my inverse cultivation test. There is only a decade left. I have to make use of the last decade wisely. Chapter 13:13, Everything is Ready. Chapter 13:13, Everything is Ready. In the last 10 years before the God test, Jian Wushuang kept cultivating into the secret room. He had kept trying to understand the swordsmanship that he had learnt from the little scattered stars game. His swordsmanship had also reached a new height. And the God test was approaching. Time passed quickly and there were only 10 days left. The last 10 days. Jian Wushuang was sitting in the secret room quietly, breathing slowly. The closer the God test was, the more peaceful he was. In the past 120 years, I have already improved myself as needed, and made all necessary preparations. Everything is ready. Jian Wushuang held his hands tightly. In the past 120 years, he had cultivated the second part of the gold secret skills to dramatically improve his magic power. Then he got the green bell, through which he mastered the mountain stillness secret skill to greatly enhance his body defense ability. Then, he interpreted the first part of the Scarlet Kingdom secret skills, which further improved his overall power. Finally, there was his swordsmanship. He figured out a way to do the little scattered stars game using 100 years, and spent more than 10 years to understand what he learnt, so that his swordsmanship also skyrocketed. In a word, he had done his best to raise his abilities in all aspects. Now he was in the best condition in his current level. Whether he could survive the God test all depended on his luck now. It's time to go. Jian Wushuang slowly stood up, took a breath, and then went to the tribulation passing pinnacle. He arrived at the top of the tribulation passing pinnacle 10 days before the God test and sat there to wait. As soon as he sat down, the heavens started rumbling. The universe changed its color and a large block of thunderclouds began to gather. King of Venomous Worms sighed, there are still 10 days left before the God test but the thunderclouds have already begun to gather and accumulate power. Jian Wushuang could feel what was happening but he did not care. Instead, he closed his eyes and tried to make his heart empty and peaceful. After Jian Wushuang's arrival, Dayu Palace began bustling. Many talents and disciples from Dayu Palace all rushed to the tribulation passing pinnacle. They just stood 10,000 miles away from the pinnacle and watched Jian Wushuang in the distance. Of course, they were also aware of the thunderclouds that were gathering. Why are the thunderclouds gathering so early? Indeed, too early. Ordinary practitioners usually see thunderclouds gather an hour before the God test. But I guess Jian Wushuang's God test will still be a few days later. 10 days exactly. The talents that had arrived were having a heated discussion. They couldn't believe what was happening. On the day when the omen came, Jian Wushuang could accurately feel that the God test would come 120 years later. In another word, there was exactly 10 days left. Powerful gods in Scarlet Island, Gold Sun Sect and Holy Prefecture also came here one after another. Jian Wushuang. I have done my best to help you. Whether you can get through the God test now all depends on you. Scarlet started at Jian Wushuang and said to him. Beside him, there were more than a dozen universe gods from Scarlet Islands, including the universe god. More than half of the universe gods from Scarlet Island had made acquaintances with Jian Wushuang in Daiyu Palace. All of them came here to see him except Tianing universe god, who couldn't show up due to his special identity. The god test will come in 10 days, but the thunderclouds have already been gathering? The universe gods looked worried. Next to the group from the Scarlet Island was the Holy Prefecture. More than 10 universe gods came here too, led by Universe God in the Nine Oceans. Universe God in the Nine Oceans watched Jian Wushuang with a murderous expression. Jian Wushuang, you are now the recognized genius in Daiyu universe, and even Qingyang was defeated by you. But the more powerful you are, the more dangerous the god test will be. Nothing but thunderclouds have gathered for an entire 10 days. I guess you are doomed to die in the god test. Universe God in the Nine Oceans was excited about that. He was eager to see Jian Wushuang die in the god test. It was because he wouldn't have to make so much efforts to take revenge of Jian Wushuang. Gold Sun Sect Master also hoped Jian Wushuang to die. He was aware of the genius of Jian Wushuang after witnessing how Qingyang Universe God was killed in the battle with Jian Wushuang. But this time, Jian Wushuang won't be so lucky. He also looked grim. In the heaven near the tribulation passing pinnacle stood Daiyu Palace Master and Lord Wuzang. Daiyu Palace Master had already banned anyone from disturbing Jian Wushuang, and anyone who disobeyed would be killed. No one dared to violate the rule under the authority of Daiyu Palace Master. And at that moment, 2 universe gods from the third heaven were also looking at the thunderclouds. The thunderclouds formed as early as when the omen came. And now they start to accumulate power 10 days before the god test and will continue for entire 10 days. How powerful it is! During my countless years in Snow Kingdom I have seen countless talents going through the god test. The highest record of thundercloud gathering I know was only 2 days. But in Jian Wushuang's case, 10 days. They had had rich experiences and witnessed a lot of cases. But what was happening was astonishing to them. From the 10 days gathering clouds, they could see how crazy and horrible the coming god test would be. In the heaven, endless thunderclouds gathered, with increasing power and pressure. 10 days soon passed by. Chapter 13-14, The Arrival of Inverse Cultivation Test and the First Divine Thunder. Chapter 13-14, The Arrival of Inverse Cultivation Test and the First Divine Thunder. Jian Wushuang sat on the peak of the tribunal passing pinnacle with his eyes closed, just like an old monk in deep meditation. In the surroundings of the tribunal passing pinnacle, if it could have been described as noisy when the experts were in discussion among themselves earlier, then it was now dead silent. Dead silent. There were no other noises. The reason wasn't that the experts didn't want to talk among themselves but because they were astonished by the thundercloud gathered in the void above. 10 days, a total of 10 days. The thundercloud in the void above continuously gathered and were constantly saving more power. The thundercloud only covered the tribunal passing pinnacle at the beginning, but it then expanded to a range of a few 100,000 miles. The experts who were waiting around the tribunal passing pinnacle retreated to a few 100,000 miles away as they were afraid that they might be within range of the terrifying god's test. The most crucial part was that the pressure from the thundercloud constantly turned stronger as the thunderclouds continue to expand. In the 10 days, the pressure from the thundercloud had reached an unbelievable level. The power was too strong. Even though they were out of the coverage of the thunderclouds, even though the pressure wasn't aimed at them, it still scared the wits out of the experts at the scene and made their hairs stand on end. Their eyes were wide open in terror and they couldn't even utter a word. Too powerful. Even the 2 universe gods in the third heaven, Master of Daiyu Palace and Wuzang, were both in an unprecedented state of horror. Wuzang, when you undergo the third god's test, was the pressure given out from the thundercloud this powerful? The Master of Daiyu Palace asked. No, Wuzang shook his head. How about you? My third God's test was a fire test and it was known to be terrifying, but I feel that it couldn't be compared to the power of Jian Wushuang's God's test in the first heaven, the master of Dayu Palace said. Then, the master of Dayu Palace and Wushuang gasped simultaneously. God's test was supposed to be more and more powerful. As for the God's test in the third heaven, supposedly the last God's test, it should be ridiculously powerful. However, they felt that the pressure spread from the thundercloud when they underwent their God's test in the third heaven couldn't match with Jian Wushuang's God test in the first heaven. What's going on? Just then. Rumble. In the middle of the huge thundercloud that covered a range of 100,000 miles, there was a fierce roar suddenly. The thunder roared and shocked all the experts gathered around Tribunal Passing Pinnacle. It's going to start. Everyone held their breath and looked towards Tribunal Passing Pinnacle. On the peak of the Tribunal Passing Pinnacle, Jian Wushuang, who had been sitting in peace as though he was in complete isolation, finally opened his eyes. Is it coming? Jian Wushuang lifted his head and looked at the sky. Even though the pressure from the thundercloud was terrifying, he was extremely calm on the inside. Jian Wushuang, a low voice was heard, I have been living off you for a few thousand years. In the few thousand years, I could give you advice and assist you whenever you come across any danger or trouble. However, you have to depend on yourself this time. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly, go ahead. Jian Wushuang waved and a red stream flowed. Jian Wushuang could only undergo the inverse cultivation test on his own. If he failed to, he would definitely vanish into thin air. If King of Venomous Worms were to stay in his body, he would definitely be involved. Hence, he had to leave. King of Venomous Worms, if I were to die in the inverse cultivation test, please head back to the eternal chaotic world on your own and look for a new ancient god. If you can't find any ancient gods in a short time, you can opt to return to the green fire world and back to Star Foggy Sea. You can at least stay alive until the new ancient god descends, Jian Wushuang said. I know, King of Venomous Worms looked into Jian Wushuang's eyes and said solemnly, Jian Wushuang, don't give up even when you reach the last critical moment. You must pass the test. Then, King of Venomous Worms dug downwards and disappeared very quickly. After Jian Wushuang heard that, he smiled and lifted his head again. Inverse cultivation test. It's the scariest god's test in eternal chaotic world. Besides, I am a 4-star imperial ancient god at the highest level. After I pass through this test, it'll be followed by the ancient god's test straight away. Ha, God thought too highly of me. However, no one can take my life as they wish. Even if he's a god. Inverse cultivation test, ancient god test. Come on. Jian Wushuang had light spurting out from his eyes and his body suddenly grew into a 3-meter-tall bronze ancient god. In the middle of his eyebrows, there was an upside-down 4-star where surging power flowed out ferociously. Roar! Jian Wushuang bellowed and it shook the earth. In the middle of the thundercloud which covered tens of thousands of miles above him, it seemed to receive Jian Wushuang's provocation. The terrifying thundercloud raged. The universe roared. Rumble. The loud rumble was from the core of the thundercloud, right in the middle of the boundless power. There was a bolt of purplish gold lightning which was as thick as a pail that struck through the thundercloud and descended to the earth. The moment the lightning appeared, there was a terrifying power that seemed as though it could destroy the earth spreading across. The moment the experts gathered around Tribunal Passing Pinnacle saw the purplish gold lightning, they were paralyzed with fear. Purplish gold. Some inner disciples of the Dayu Palace couldn't help but let out an exclamation. In God's test, the most commonly seen was Thunder Test. The purplish gold lightning obviously belonged to Thunder Test. However, there were different levels in Thunder Test too. For instance, when Universe God Dong Men underwent the God test in the second heaven, his second divine lightning was gilded. Then, the divine thunder that Jian Wushuang was dealing with was in purplish gold. The purplish gold lightning was much stronger compared to the gilded lightning back then. On the peak of Tribunal Passing Pinnacle, Jian Wushuang, who had already become a bronze ancient god, stared at the purplish gold lightning that was above him, and there was madness in his eyes. Purplish gold divine lightning? A divine lightning of such level isn't even worth it for me to take defense. Jian Wushuang let out a bellow and he waved to take off his blood-killing plate armor. He stripped his upper body naked and exposed his ancient god body on the peak. He stared at the purplish gold lightning as it descended, but he didn't look like he was going to block the strike at all. He wanted to resist the terrifying purplish gold lightning with his divine body directly. Chapter 13:15, Fought hard against three sacred thunders. Chapter 13:15, Fought hard against three sacred thunders. What Jian Wushuang did on the Tribulation Passing Pinnacle astonished everyone. What the hell is he doing? Why did he take off his sergeant's armor when the god test came? He doesn't even have an intention of warding off the sacred thunder. Did he give up resisting and is waiting to die? Is he going to die? At this moment, the heavens were roaring continuously. Everyone witnessed that the purple gold's sacred thunder directly struck the body of Jian Wushuang without weakening at all. Bang! A deafening noise broke out. Even universe gods in the second heaven expressed their surprise about the annihilatory power. Obviously they were amazed about how powerful the purple gold thunder was. Everyone was fully concentrating on what was happening on the Tribulation Passing Pinnacle. After the purple gold thunder disappeared, Jian Wushuang, a 3-meter-tall ancient god, still stood there and held his hands tightly, with the force of the purple gold thunder covering his body. And, suddenly, he raised his head. Humph! Jian Wushuang violently shook his body. The force of the purple gold thunder dispersed instantly and his bones produced a cracking sound. Great! Jian Wushuang felt excited. He rumbled, with a sound loud enough to shake the whole universe. Talent out of the Tribulation Passing Pinnacle couldn't believe their eyes when they saw Jian Wushuang. He is still safe and sound. How come? Impossible. He hasn't got any injuries after being struck by the scared thunder. Even his breath remains the same, or has become powerful. All bystanders were speechless. Among them, a universe god from the second heaven cried out, "If I were him, I would have to do whatever I could to resist such a huge thunder." But he just resisted it only with the power in his body. In the distant heaven afar, Dayu Palace Master and Lord Wutsang looked at each other, feeling amazed. Resist the thunder with his own body power. How brave he is. Dayu Palace said. Actually, there had been similar cases in the eternal chaotic world, but they were few. After all, no one wanted to risk dying with his body totally destroyed. But today, they saw Jian Wushuang successfully resist the thunder test with his own body power. It is just the start of the test. Dayu Palace Master murmured. Lord Wutsang also raised his head and looked at heaven. Other bystanders also stopped talking. Normally, cultivators only had to go through one sacred thunder in the first part of their god test. But obviously, the god test of Jian Wushuang was far more difficult than that. After the first sacred thunder, the thundercloud did not dissipate, but quickly began to form the second thunder. At this time, Jian Wushuang stood at the Tribulation Passing Pinnacle and stared at the heaven, with his blood violently boiling and his hands filled with electricity. After a while, the second sacred thunder shot from the center of the thundercloud. With the same purple-gold color, the second sacred thunder was twice as large as the first one. Boom! The second purple-gold sacred thunder, which contained far more annihilatory power than the first one, shot to Jian Wushuang all of a sudden. Under unimaginable pressure, Jian Wushuang still left the blood-killing plate armor aside and stood there without any intention to use defense. He only used his own body power to resist the second thunder. Doesn't he need defense yet? The second thunder is much more powerful. This crazy man. Those watching Jian Wushuang couldn't help crying out. Under the gaze of all, the second thunder struck Jian Wushuang, who still took no defense at all. Bang! A horrible power broke out from the thunder, strongly hitting the tribulation-passing pinnacle, which then sunk and formed into the endless hole. In that hole, the earth was severely burnt and barren. Right at the bottom of the hole, a figure, still strong and powerful, resiliently stood all the torture. Although parts of his body were bleeding or burnt, or even mutilated, he still stood firmly and his breath and power didn't weaken but even strengthened. He stepped out of the huge hole, and at the same time, his mutilated skin all recovered at an incredibly fast rate. Without the help of King of Venomous Worms, Jian Wushuang could still recover himself within a short time. He hasn't died? Despite more efforts and injuries as well, he finally resisted the second thunder. Genius! Those bystanders were all impressed by Jian Wushuang. And now, at the center of the vast thundercloud, the third sacred thunder was forming. Boom! The third sacred thunder was shot out with a deafening bang that was able to shake the universe. The same color, but the size was 10 times larger than the last one. The annihilatory power, 10 times larger. Seeing that the third sacred thunder had come, Jian Wushuang got alert. The first sacred thunder caused no trouble for me, but the second one almost reached the highest threshold level that I can bear. And the third one may kill me if I still use nothing for defense. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists. In an instant, the blood-killing plate armor that he had thrown aside was reshaped into a scarlet flowing light, flowing around him and then turning into the scarlet armor again. Automatically, the armor covered the whole body of Jian Wushuang, including his head. Boom! Then the third sacred thunder struck onto Jian Wushuang heavily. The annihilatory power it produced was far more destructive than the previous ones. But thanks to Jian Wushuang's blood-killing plate armor, the power of the sacred thunder was weakened sharply to 1/10. The remaining power didn't cause much damage to Jian Wushuang. Carry on. With tightly clenched hands, Jian Wushuang stood there looking up to the endless heaven. He roared with a firm determination, and his voice reverberated through the whole universe. Those watching Jian Wushuang all became speechless. They had witnessed him get through 3 sacred thunders already. Formidable power. Formidable Jian Wushuang. Chapter 13-16, Breakthrough with Power, Deal with Another 3 Strikes. Chapter 13-16, Breakthrough with Power, Deal with Another 3 Strikes. Rumble. In the void, the thundercloud continued to churn and the originally terrifying pressure became worse. Under a normal situation, even when one undergo God's test in the third heaven, they would only come across 3 strikes of lightning if it was thunder test. But then Jian Wushuang, who was undergoing his God's test in the first heaven, had already been through 3 strikes of lightning. After the 3 strikes of lightning, the inverse cultivation test didn't end there but looked as though it had just begun. As everyone held their breath, in the depth of the thundercloud, the 4th divine lightning was brewing. Plus, when the 4th bolt of lightning was brewing, it obviously took longer than the 3rd strike. Rumble. The 4th divine lightning finally descended. Wow! A huge crimson lightning rumbled and struck towards Jian Wushuang like a snake. Crimson divine lighting. The experts surrounding tribunal passing pinnacle revealed a terrified expression. Jian Wushuang's face grew grave, as he could feel that the crimson divine lightning was far greater than the previous 3 strikes. It was on an entirely different level. Regarding the diving lightning, Jian Wushuang didn't resist it with his divine body recklessly. The very moment the divine lightning struck, there was a flash of gold light from his eyes. Rumble. The billowing power of ancient God suddenly surged. Jian Wushuang looked cold as the boundless ancient God power converged on the index finger of his right hand. Then, the index finger, which was covered entirely by the golden energy, suddenly spurted. The 3rd finger of ancient God, destroy the world. Rumble. The sudden crack in the void expanded into a huge black hole. In the black hole, there was an ancient god figure which was tens of thousand meters tall and shimmering in gold that appeared from nowhere. The ancient god condensed into a substantial figure from an imaginary shadow at the beginning. His strong feet stepped on the ground and he roared when he pointed his ridiculously huge index finger. The third finger of ancient god. The power to destroy the world. Before everyone's terrified gazes, the huge gilded finger and the crimson lightning descended from above collided. Bang! The two terrifying powers exploded. Both contained the power to destroy the world. The terrifying impact shook the void. In the end, the gilded ancient god forcefully broke the crimson divine lightning. Even though there was partial crimson lightning that gushed onto Jian Wushuang, it wasn't enough to pose a threat for Jian Wushuang. The fourth divine lightning was broken apart by Jian Wushuang. After the fourth strike, rumble. Without any interval nor time for formation, the fifth divine lightning struck immediately. It was also a crimson lightning, but it was a great increment of power. There was fire in Jian Wushuang's eyes. The ancient god power in his body had depleted almost 80% after he performed the third finger technique. He naturally couldn't pull the same trick again. Then, the Blood Mountain sword appeared in his hand. It was the first time Jian Wushuang took out the Blood Mountain sword since he started the inverse cultivation test. It was as though the sword felt Jian Wushuang's feelings. After the Blood Mountain sword appeared, it gave out a shrill buzz. It was like it was roaring, bellowing in anger. Good brother, let's do this. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and raised Blood Mountain sword with both his hands. The terrifying sword power spread from his body and soared up into the sky. Eternal light. Jian Wushuang bellowed without hesitation and put the rank 1 strongest unique skill that he had created 120 years ago to play. Suddenly, a brilliantly beautiful light shined. When the light shined, it was as though it formed eternity and didn't go away from the universe for very long. In the end, it finally clashed against the fifth divine lightning that was descending from the sky. Bang! The universe shook vigorously. The ground under Jian Wushuang's feet cracked and the terrifying crimson lightning formed a superstorm above the peak of the tribunal passing pinnacle. However, the core strength of the fifth divine lightning shattered by the hit of the brilliantly beautiful light. After the fifth divine lightning, rumble. The sixth divine lightning followed closely behind without giving Jian Wushuang any time to catch his breath. Jian Wushuang looked cold. As the Blood Mountain sword shook vigorously in his hand, there was an unprecedented madness twinkling in his eyes. Buzz! A shapeless power swept out from Jian Wushuang's body. The power seemed illusory and almost no one noticed it. However, it was extremely extensive at the same time. Along with Jian Wushuang wielding his sword tightly, the shapeless power exploded the very next second. Dragon roar. Jian Wushuang's eyes were giving out. Roar. A towering dragon roar was heard across the sky. Everyone held their breath as they watched, and there was a dark gray giant dragon that appeared out of nowhere. The dark gray giant dragon had an unprecedented rage and a miraculous power that plundered toward the sixth divine lightning with madness. Rank 1 strongest unique skill. Dragon roar. Jian Wushuang invented the technique after he had spent 120 years resolving the Little Scattered Stars game and increased his understanding towards sword principle. The technique was different from Eternal Light, as Eternal Light was an absolute power. Dragon Roar was a combination of soul power and sword principle. On top of that, it mainly depended on soul power. The dark gray giant dragon was formed and substantiated through Jian Wushuang's soul power. The soul power was immeasurably extensive. The combination of a giant dragon substantiated through soul power and impressive sword principle structured the terrifying technique. By performing this technique alone, Jian Wushuang's soul power was exhausted entirely. In the air, the dark gray giant dragon finally collided with the sixth divine lightning descended from the sky. During the collision, the dark gray giant dragon opened its mouth and swallowed the sixth divine lightning. When the divine lightning entered the dark gray giant dragon's body, the terrifying power erupted and its huge body suddenly exploded. However, the power of the sixth lightning was used up as well. Hence, it dispersed in the end. The sixth diving lightning was forcefully broken apart as well. Everyone was in awe. The people who are watching Jian Wushuang going through God's test outside tribunal passing pinnacle was all left speechless in shock. They originally thought the fourth divine lightning was extremely scary and it'd be difficult for Jian Wushuang to resist. Who knows? After the fourth divine lightning, the fifth and the sixth divine lightning struck without interval. Even so, Jian Wushuang performed a strong power. He broke through with his power and resolved all three divine lightnings directly. A terrifying power. That's Jian Wushuang. Chapter 13-17, Spared no efforts. Chapter 13-17, Spared no efforts. Boom! 3 sacred thunders had shot down from the heavens one after another. However, the huge thundercloud showed no signs of dissipating. Instead, it began to slowly form the next sacred thunder. Another one? How come? This is impossible. All cried out in astonishment. Even the experienced master of the Dayu Palace and Lord Wuzong had never seen many cases. Why would only a universe master have to continuously receive more than 6 horrible sacred thunders just in his first part of the God test? The 7 sacred thunders. It is definitely an unusual God test. Bang! Under the gaze of all, the thundercloud shot a brand new sacred thunder again. And after seeing the 7th sacred thunder, everyone's eyes were wide open. It was also of crimson color, but different from the last one. This crimson sacred thunder was accompanied by a stream of green fire. That small fire scared everyone. It's a fire test. Oh my goodness! The crowd cried out. Jian Wushuang was also alarmed. He couldn't be more familiar with that green flame. He remembered that Dongmen Universe God, who could have resisted the 2nd sacred thunder, was burnt to die because of that little stream of green fire. What's worse, the fire that Jian Wushuang met this time was far larger than that of Dongmen Universe God's test. Is the most dangerous part of the inverse cultivation test coming? Jian Wushuang stared at the heavens. Even though the 7 sacred thunder seemed creepy, Jian Wushuang didn't feel afraid at all. He was ready to embrace the challenge no matter how difficult it was. Come on! Jian Wushuang got several elixirs in his hands by using his magic power. He had collected those elixirs exclusively for the inverse cultivation. Each of them was very precious. With the help of elixirs, Jian Wushuang's weak body recovered soon. Then he took out another 2 treasures. They were the Blaze Quicksand Gourd and the Dark Green Bell. He once lent Blaze Quicksand Gourd to Master of the Dayu Palace and didn't take it back even when he would battle with Qing Yang Universe God. And the Master of the Dayu Palace hadn't returned to him until 20 years ago. Now this treasure might help Jian Wushuang in his inverse cultivation. As he opened the Blaze Quicksand Gourd, a large amount of Blaze Quicksand gushed out. The Blaze Quicksand flew at a crazy speed to the 7th sacred thunder, which helped to weaken its power and lower its speed. And the small dark green bell on his other hand, transformed itself into an enormous ancient bell. Immovable mountain. Jian Wushuang murmured a spell, catalyzing the secret skill of the dark green bell. Immediately, this green bell produced a green halo, which surrounded the whole body of Jian Wushuang. Boom! The 7th sacred thunder came with irresistible force. It went through the Blaze Quicksand and instantly struck the bell, producing a low and deep sound. The bell violently shook, with a crack appearing on the surface. And the crack became larger and larger at an alarming rate and finally it burst. However, the 7th sacred thunder, as well as the green fire within it, was still powerful and continued to attack Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang felt shocked, and he tried his best to mobilize all his remaining power. Go, Blood Mountain Sword! Jian Wushuang generated all his power into the Blood Mountain Sword and ordered it to collide with the seventh sacred thunder. This time, the collision slashed the power of the seventh sacred thunder by more than half. Only a tiny fraction of power, along with a small part of the green fire, rushed to Jian Wushuang. At this moment, Jian Wushuang was instantly equipped with the blood-killing plate armor. Bang! Despite being weakened by the blood-killing plate armor, the burning green fire was still furious enough and caused great pain to Jian Wushuang. Oh! Jian Wushuang spit a large amount of blood and went pale immediately as the green fire also went out. Finally, Jian Wushuang successfully resisted the seventh sacred thunder. But only after a moment, Jian Wushuang found that deep in the heaven, the eighth sacred thunder was simmering. The eighth? There was nothing but dead silence among the talents who were watching. Jian Wushuang didn't expect that either. Now nothing is left except the tribunal passing elixir. Soon, another elixir turned up in his hand. The invaluable tribunal passing elixir. It was prepared especially for the God test, in which Jian Wushuang could recover his power to 100% within an instant. An extraordinary elixir. But only one elixir could be taken in one test. That was why Jian Wushuang didn't swallow this elixir when he exhausted almost all of his power under the attack of the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth sacred thunder. But this time, he had no choice. He swallowed it without any hesitation. As soon as he swallowed the elixir, he recovered his power at an astonishing speed, faster than that with the help of King of Venomous Worms. One extraordinary function of the tribunal passing elixir is transforming the power of the surrounding sacred thunders into my power. No wonder I was told that it could only play a role in the God test. Wonderful. Jian Wushuang's power reached its best now. However, his ancient God power and soul power was still exhausted because the elixir could only be used to help recover spiritual power. Right at the moment when Jian Wushuang fully recovered his spiritual power, a booming sound shook the universe. The eighth sacred thunder arrived, completely composed of green fire. The fire test. The entire fire test. Chapter 13:18, The Last Bolt of Lightning. Chapter 13:18, The Last Bolt of Lightning. Fire test. It was a complete fire test. The moment it took shape, everyone on the scene was shaken. Jian Wushuang's expression looked extremely solemn. He watched as the fire test slowly descended. Viroom. The terrifying flame suddenly swept out from Jian Wushuang's body. Suddenly, the universe became a scarlet fire sea. Jian Wushuang stood right at the core of the scarlet fire sea. The scarlet flame submitted to him and he was the king of the scarlet fire sea. That is Scarlet Kingdom. It's Scarlet Kingdom, the secret skill that the island of Secret Island gained fame with. The master of Scarlet Island passed down Scarlet Kingdom to him. Many experts that recognized the Scarlet Fire Sea couldn't help but gasp. Scarlet Kingdom was quite famous in the Dayu world. The master of Scarlet Island swept over Dayu world with the secret skill and he was all and might among universe gods in the second heaven. Then, Jian Wushuang learned the secret skill and he performed the secret skill as he underwent God's test. He used the Scarlet Fire Sea to fight against the horrifying fire test that was descending from the void above. Come on! Jian Wushuang gripped Blood Mountain Sword in his hand tightly as he bellowed. The Scarlet Fire Sea surged as though it too was roaring in anger and giving vent to its unhappiness. The next moment, he held the handle of Blood Mountain Sword with both of his hands. A surging sword aura that made people hold their breath was given out from Jian Wushuang's body. The Blood Mountain Sword was also trembling in rage. After I cultivated in seclusion for a century, I accumulated swordsmanship through resolving the Little Scattered Stars game and spent another dozen of years to constantly digest and understand. Then, I finally created the stroke technique. I created this stroke technique specifically for the inverse cultivation test. It is born to fight the test and it exists to resolve the test. Its name is Test Wrecker. Jian Wushuang mumbled. The moment he finished talking, an unprecedented brightness flashed from his eyes. He gripped his blood mountain sword tightly as he waved it without hesitation. Buzz! A cold, ear-piercing noise was heard across the universe. It was extremely shrill, as though someone were roaring hysterically. A cold sword light that was eye-catching suddenly lit up. That is a rank 2 unique skill. The experts outside Tribunal Passing Pinnacle stared. The sword light appeared and was followed by dark whirlpool forming around it. There was an unprecedented rage and determination along with Jian Wushuang's billowing fighting spirit and unhappiness. Surrounded by the scarlet fire sea, it suddenly collided with the emerald green fire test descending from the sky above. Poof! There wasn't the clashing noise that they imagined there'd be, nor was there any terrifying pressure that spread around. The moment the two collided, it started melting at a terrifying speed. The boundless emerald green flame burned everything mercilessly. The sword technique that Jian Wushuang performed earlier was extremely fierce, and it was the strongest stroke he had performed as of then. It was a full-force stroke with the assistance of Scarlet Kingdom. However, he was facing a real fire test. Among the three gods' test, the fire test was in second place. Its scary level wasn't comparable to thunder test. Looking at the cold sword light melting at a shocking speed, it disappeared entirely very soon. However, the divine lightning that was formed with emerald green flame had parts of its power left and it surged towards Jian Wushuang. Viroom! The emerald green flame came into contact with blood-killing plate armor and suddenly started burning crazily. Even though it was separated by the blood-killing plate armor, Jian Wushuang could still feel the blood all over his body and all his organs were burning altogether. Humph! A coolness grew, and the soul power in Jian Wushuang's body spurted out and wrapped around the emerald green flame on the surface of his body. Poof poof poof. An enormous amount of soul power was burning mercilessly, but the emerald green flame gradually slowed down. Wow! Jian Wushuang suddenly spat 2 mouthfuls of blood. His face grew pale and his body started quivering. He looked like he couldn't stand straight on his feet. But the very next moment, he lifted his head. He could clearly feel that the thundercloud in the void above had started brewing again. The movement of brewing was much bigger than the previous 8 times of divine lightning. Is it the last strike? Jian Wushuang's pupil contracted and he waved his hand directly to wipe away the blood on the corner of his lips. Then, he stood straight. Even though his divine body was severely damaged under the 8 strikes of divine lightning and he couldn't stand firmly, he was still standing proudly. From when he was born till now, no matter what kind of danger or hardship he faced, he never backed off. Such firmness and determination, that's Jian Wushuang. Looking at the thundercloud's transformation, everyone outside of Tribunal Passing Pinnacle was stirred. There's a 9th strike. There's one last one. This is the last test. Everyone gripped their fist and they were shouting at the bottom of their heart. They were glad that they didn't come across such terrifying God's test. At the same time, they were also looking forward to Jian Wushuang, who had created a lot of miracles in the God's test to create another miracle in order to cross the last move. The last divine lightning, it should be the strongest strike. The master of Dayu Palace too clenched his fist as his eyes beamed with excitement. The first God test and he encounters a total of 9 bolts of divine lightning. This is unbelievable. If he were to die at the last divine lightning, it ends here. However, if he were to pass this, his achievement after this would be unpredictable. Wu Zeng clenched his teeth and thought excitedly. Jian Wushuang, one last one. You must pass this last move no matter what. King of Venomous Worms, who was hiding deep in the ground, was watching Jian Wushuang all this while. He was also cheering him up at that very moment. Pass it. It's the last, don't give up. You can do it. The experts surrounding Tribunal Passing Pinnacle started cheering for Jian Wushuang in their heart too. The God's test that day sent all the spectators to astonishment. Jian Wushuang revealed his capability and stubbornness in the God's test, and he turned people around. Even Universe God Jiu Hai and the Master of Golden Sun sect, who harbored deep-seated grudges against Jian Wushuang, were impressed with Jian Wushuang's performance in the God's test, even though they wanted Jian Wushuang to die in the God's test. On the peak of Tribunal Passing Pinnacle, Jian Wushuang lifted his head to look at the sky above. His body trembled faintly and he felt every living thing in the universe was cheering for him. The last bolt of divine lightning. Life or death relies on this move. Chapter 13:19, 9 Sacred Thunders and 3 Tests all at once. Chapter 13:19, 9 Sacred Thunders and 3 Tests all at once. Boom! The 9th sacred thunder, which had drawn everyone's attention, finally stopped simmering. The last sacred thunder could determine whether Jian Wushuang could survive. It gradually revealed its formidable force. At that moment, the dark clouds separated from each other, from which 2 flashes of dazzling light. One flash of light was endlessly dark and the other, deep green. 2 sacred thunders. These 2 flashes of light staggered all of the talents who were watching. They knew there were 2 sacred thunders. And the endless dark one was the most powerful dark sacred thunder, and carried an annihilatory power. And the deep green one was an entire fire test sacred thunder. A deep green fire test. They arrive at the same time. Astonishing. Everyone was speechless. Generally speaking, 3 kinds of God test came separately. Occasionally, the thunder test came with a trace of fire, only a small trace. But now, an entire dark sacred thunder and a fire test sacred thunder came simultaneously. Worse still, Jian Wushuang felt a sense of anxiety. The anxiety came without a sign. Actually, he had been able to stay calm in any dangerous situation after he had tackled so many challenges. Even at the brink of death, he had always been calm without even a trace of anxiety. But now, he was upset, and this irritability intensified, directly affecting his emotions and even his control of his own power. At this moment, Jian Wushuang found it extremely difficult to control his own spiritual power. Shit! He bit his lips violently, causing a great pain that made his mind clearer. However, his face became completely distorted and horrible. The eyes were also full of unprecedented aggression and madness. A dark fog containing a mysterious power slowly rose in his body, triggering his irritation and conquering him. Bystanders outside the Tribulation Passing Pinnacle didn't know what was happening. What is he doing? What on earth is going on? What is happening? Many practitioners who were watching felt confused. Only a few distinguished gods, including the Master of Dayu Palace and Lord Wutsang, knew what happened. They were shocked. It's a mind test. Really? Even Master of the Dayu Palace, the supreme god in the Dayu universe, felt amazed and exclaimed. A mind test. Everyone was shocked when they knew what was exactly happening. It was true. A mind test. The most difficult one among the 3 kinds of God tests, and also the one that had been rarely seen. It was said that only a vicious sinner taking numerous lives would meet with the mind test, with a certain yet low possibility. Within the long history of the Dayu universe, the mind test had never happened at all. That was why Master of the Dayu Palace didn't know much about it and had only mentioned a little information in classes. And now, Jian Wushuang was receiving the mind test. Furthermore, it came with the thunder test and the fire test. 3 kinds of test came to the same person at the same time. How can it be possible? This is impossible. The usually indifferent and calm Lord Wutsang couldn't help crying out. Why is only the first part of the God test already so catastrophic? I have never heard about this. Under normal circumstances, no matter how a cultivator is genius or vicious, he will never meet with such horrible test. Unless Lord Wutsang figured out one possibility. More specifically, he was reminded of a legend. Unless Jian Wushuang is undergoing the so-called inverse cultivation test. Lord Wutsang felt staggered. Inverse cultivation test. Master of the Dayu Palace couldn't believe what he heard. Inverse cultivation test. The most horrible god test in the eternal chaotic world. Also the most unique one. And the god test for universe gods was the most deadly in the inverse cultivation test. Even though Master of the Dayu Palace and Lord Wutsang were experienced, they had just heard of inverse cultivation but never seen it, let alone the inverse cultivation test. And now they realized that Jian Wushuang was receiving the inverse cultivation test. Only this could explain why the undergoing test was so horrible. Jian Wushuang was practicing inverse cultivation. Master of the Dayu Palace and Lord Wutsang clenched their hands excitedly. They were now sure of who Jian Wushuang was. Now on the peak of the tribulation passing pinnacle, the dark fog had already covered the whole body of Jian Wushuang, whose breath was getting more and more violent. Uhu! He roared with a distorted face. He roared, with an unprecedented determination. He didn't want to lose. He didn't want to end his cultivation journey right now. He didn't want to die. After all, there were still many things for him to accomplish. He haven't met Shuang Er. He haven't known who his master was. He could not die. Chapter 1320, Alive or Dead? Chapter 1320, Alive or Dead? Outside the tribunal passing pinnacle, countless experts held their breath as they watched everything that was happening on the tribunal passing pinnacle. They could feel Jian Wushuang's rage clearly, and they could tell how tough the test was that Jian Wushuang was going through. But at that very moment, Jian Wushuang, who was mad, suddenly lifted his head and stared into the void before him with his bloodshot eyes. In those bloodshot eyes, they were covered in a murderous aura and madness. However, there was a stronger sense of determination. I, Jian Wushuang, cultivated till today. I have been following my conscience whenever I do anything. Although I have killed many, those who are killed deserved it. I never fail my conscience. I never fail anyone. Nor have I failed the way of heaven. Now, you are trying to influence me with just the devil. Dream on. Jian Wushuang's shrill scream was heard across the universe. The very moment he shouted, he hammered his chest with his fist. Poof! Jian Wushuang spat a mouthful of blood, but it stimulated his consciousness with the sharp pain. In turn, it suppressed the devil in him that was growing. Followed by Jian Wushuang's willpower, the star power that had regathered in his body for the past century suddenly erupted. The secret skill of Star Palace was suddenly carried out. At the same time, Jian Wushuang waved his hand and a scroll appeared from nowhere. It was the Chaos Divine Treasure, Mountain River Map. Up! Jian Wushuang bellowed and the power of Star suddenly erupted along with the remaining soul power in his body. Then, it flowed towards the Mountain River Map without holding back. Under the drive of the soul power, the Mountain River Map opened directly. The very next moment. Virum! The extreme power of the dark and light combined together flawlessly, and a swirling vortex of black and white appeared from nowhere. The swirling vortex immediately covered a range of hundreds of thousand miles the moment it appeared, and it ceaselessly grew larger in lightning speed while Jian Wushuang was positioned right in the middle of the whirlpool. The grand formation of the enduring samsara. It was the most impressive technique of Master Xian Yi, Jian Wushuang's master. He forcefully refined the grand formation of the enduring samsara within the Mountain River Map. The formation refined and suddenly became a technique that the Mountain River Map that could use. Different from the 9-province seal, the grand formation of the enduring samsara could both attack and defend. Jian Wushuang could only put the technique to play when he disregarded the cost. In collaboration with the eruption of the secret skill of Star Palace, it became Jian Wushuang's strongest trump card. Then, he used the trump card to resist the thunder test and fire test that descended from the sky. Come on. Jian Wushuang was persistent. His entire body and mind were drowning in the struggle of the mind test. In the outer world, the 2 lightning rods and the huge swirling vortex of black and white clashed before every cultivator's eyes. Boom! The explosion was heard across the universe. The scary whistle spread and the experts surrounding Tribunal Passing Pinnacle felt a sharp pain in their eyes. Boundless dark lighting and emerald flame filled every corner of Tribunal Passing Pinnacle. Poof poof poof. The spine-chilling sight took place. The peak of Tribunal Passing Pinnacle, which was specially designated for undergoing God's test, started disappearing at a speed which one could see with naked eyes. Yes, disappear. From the top to the bottom, the entire peak was eaten up by the emerald flames mercilessly. While Jian Wushuang, who was on the peak, was naturally within the scope of the disaster. It only took a brief moment until everything slowed down. Everyone saw that the peak of Tribunal Passing Pinnacle had disappeared entirely. Not only the peak, but even half of the hillsides were also taken down. The only part remaining was the bottom half of the Tribunal Passing Pinnacle. Silence. The entire universe was in dead silence. Everyone was shocked and was left speechless. The terrifying God's test, an unprecedented God's test, shocked everyone. Every expert from all over the world only came back to reality after a long pause. The moment they came back to reality, they immediately looked towards the Tribunal Passing Pinnacle that was beyond recognition. Jian Wushuang. Where's Jian Wushuang? Everyone stared at the huge pit on Tribunal Passing Pinnacle. The pit was so deep that they couldn't see the bottom. With their naked eyes, they couldn't see the bottom clearly. They could only rely on their own consciousness to feel. They tried to feel. No sound. No sound at all. Is he dead? Everyone became silent. They couldn't feel any movement on Tribunal Passing Pinnacle. It meant that Jian Wushuang passed away. Sigh. The Master of Scarlet Island sighed, but his emotion was extremely complicated. Those behind the Master of Scarlet Island were universe gods from the Scarlet Island. They exchanged glances and shook their head. God's test was a situation which, out of 10, 1 would survive and 9 would be dead. Hence, they were mentally prepared beforehand. However, when Jian Wushuang revealed his impressive ability during the process of undergoing God's test, they were looking forward to Jian Wushuang passing through it. Because once he passed through, it represented the birth of a true expert. But in the end, he failed. Sigh. Universe God Jiao Hai from Holy Prefecture let out a heavy breath. Luckily he failed in the end. Otherwise, Universe God Jiao Hai exclaimed. He recalled the process of the God's test, and he who was a universe god in the second heaven was shocked too. He couldn't imagine what he would do if Jian Wushuang passes through the God's test. By then, would he still have the guts to look for Jian Wushuang to take revenge? Luckily, Jian Wushuang failed. Hence, whatever it was, it naturally wouldn't happen. The Master of Dayu Palace and Wu Tsang stood side by side in the void above. It's such a pity, the Master of Dayu Palace let out a sigh. It's really a pity, Wu Tsang nodded solemnly, a true prodigy. There might not be anyone from Snow Dojo who could be compared favorably with him. If he were to pass through the inverse cultivation test, he was destined to become a real peak expert. He is definitely far beyond me, but he failed in the end. Of course, we can't blame him. The inverse cultivation test was really too scary. Thinking of the inverse cultivation test that Jian Wushuang had been through, Wu Tsang still felt astonished. The inverse cultivation test was a definite nightmare. Everyone sighed. Everyone sighed with respect. More so that everyone thought it was regrettable for Jian Wushuang. At the depth of the pit, King of Venomous Worms stared at Tribunal Passing Pinnacle. Jian Wushuang. No way, it's impossible. If you were to really be dead, I, as your parasite, should definitely feel something. But I don't feel anything. We still maintain a string of connection. It means that you aren't dead. King of Venomous King was emotional and his mind and body were trembling. He let out his sensing power and tried his best to look for Jian Wushuang's whereabouts. In a brief moment, the King of Venomous Worms felt an extremely weak aura that might vanish into thin air at any time in the deepest part of the huge pit on Tribunal Passing Pinnacle. Chapter 1321, The Sacred Lights Came. Chapter 1321, The Sacred Lights Came. He is here. King of Venomous Worms went wild with joy. Although King of Venomous Worms hadn't recovered his power to 100%, his power to recover and detect was still incomparable. Even universe gods in the third heaven didn't have the power to detect as well as him. Therefore, when everyone else believed that Jian Wushuang had died, King of Venomous Worms could detect his breath. Jian Wushuang was still breathing. No matter how weak the breath was, he was still alive. Aha, you are still alive. King of Venomous Worms was extremely happy, but he didn't rush to help Jian Wushuang recover. Because he knew that Jian Wushuang was able to recover himself. King of Venomous Worms looked at the sky. I guess the sacred light is coming. However, the huge, dark cloud was still staying in the heavens, showing no signs of dissipating. Why is that? Why don't the clouds dissipate? Cultivators outside the Tribulation Passing Pinnacle felt something unexpected. Under normal circumstances, the thunderclouds would dissipate after the cultivators died in the God test. Just like the situation where Dong Men Universe God died in the God test. But now the clouds were still there, while others could feel the breath of Jian Wushuang. Maybe, Jian Wushuang was still alive. A universe god guessed, surprising others around him. Didn't he die? But if he didn't die, why can't others feel his breath? Boom! At the moment, a huge thundercloud split. What? Everyone looked up to the heavens, seeing and sensing a golden light from the splitting thunderclouds. A golden light as bright as the sun, providing everyone comfortable warmth. The sacred light. Everyone's eyes were wide open. The sacred light would come and shine on the cultivators who passed the God test, helping them recover and transform their power. Everyone was familiar with that light. And now, it had arrived. Jian Wushuang is still alive. Master of the Scarlet Island exclaimed. Many other universe gods also raised their heads. How can it be possible? Universe god Jiu Hai felt nervous. Even Master of the Dayu Palace and Lord Wuzang also felt surprised by the light. They had just thought that Jian Wushuang had died. But now, the light was coming. And he was still alive. Boom! 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 The heaven roared 9 times as the golden light in the splitting thunderclouds got denser and brighter, and then was divided into 9 flashes. Each one of the 9 flashes, huge and colorful, gushed right into the bottom of the huge hole in the Tribulation Passing Pinnacle. 9 sacred lights coming at the same time. 9 sacred lights. Everyone became breathless. The sacred light, containing tremendous power, helped cultivators recover and transform their power. Generally speaking, cultivators who pass the God test of the first heaven only receive 1 sacred light. The second heaven, 2. And the lights were usually narrow. But now 9 sacred lights came at the same time. The size of each was 1/10 as large as normal ones. What did this mean? Master of the Dayu Palace said, the more difficult the God test is, the more benefits after that. I remember I received 3 sacred lights a meter wide after the fire test, which already brought me huge benefits. And now, after such a horrible inverse cultivation test, Jian Wushuang will certainly get far more benefits than we could imagine. I wonder how powerful he could become after receiving 9 sacred lights. Lord Wuzong was excited. Others cultivators were amazed and also admired Jian Wushuang. They were all waiting to see Jian Wushuang receive the sacred lights. Half of the tribulation passing pinnacle was destroying, leaving a huge, dark and lifeless hole. Right at the bottom of the hole, Jian Wushuang was lying there, injured and weak. Despite the protection of the blood-killing plate armor, the powerful sacred thunder struck Jian Wushuang, nearly tearing him apart and burning his skin. Thanks to his inverse cultivation and the experience of immortality, Jian Wushuang became extremely resilient, which explained why he survived such a devastating attack. Others, including universe gods in the third heaven like Master of Dayu Palace, couldn't have been as lucky as Jian Wushuang under the same attack. How lucky am I? Jian Wushuang lay there extremely weak, but he smiled happily at this moment. He was delighted for his achievement. Although he had almost died, he now survived and got away with death. He had passed the first part of the inverse cultivation test. Now he was blessed by the 9 sacred lights. The power of warmth went into the body of Jian Wushuang, relieving his great pain and making him comfortable. He was embracing the sacred lights, safe and sound. The 9 sacred lights cradled him just as a kind mother would for her child. Thanks to the lights, Jian Wushuang recovered himself just within a moment, several times faster than King of Venomous Worms. And soon, Jian Wushuang started to transform himself. Chapter 1322, Transformation. Chapter 1322, Transformation. Transformation. The transformation was a transformation of the divine body. The transformation was also the transformation of spiritual power to divine power. It was a transformation from Universe Master to Universe God. It was also a transformation from 4-star Ancient God to 5-star Ancient God. At the same time, it was a transformation from weak to strong. Universe God. In an ordinary world, he could really be considered an expert. At this level, he could really be considered a true God. This feeling. It's such a nice feeling. Jian Wushuang sat up. He closed his eyes and a smile was plastered on his face while he enjoyed the nice feeling that was brought forward from the transformation. At the same time, he was also enjoying the joy derived from the constant increment of power from the transformation. The transformation was vast. Jian Wushuang could feel a tremendous change happening in his bones, muscles, and cells all over his body every second. His divine body was experiencing a frenzied enhancement at an unbelievable speed. Virum. The spiritual power in Jian Wushuang's body was also starting to transform. The process of spiritual power transforming into divine power originally required a set amount of time. Like many universe gods who just passed their god's test, merely parts of their divine powers transformed, but they still required another period of time to slowly transform. Then, they would finally complete their transformation and become a real universe god. However, Jian Wushuang skipped over the process entirely. Jian Wushuang could clearly feel the terrifying transformation speed of his divine power. In a brief moment where he took a few breaths and most of his divine power had successfully transformed. As time ticked, the divine power in his body completed its transformation. Divine power, is this my divine power? Jian Wushuang could feel the surging power filling up his body. Divine power, the symbol of a universe god. The strength of divine power represented the true power of a universe god to a certain extent. Jian Wushuang could clearly feel how ferocious his divine power was. The King of Venomous Worms previously said that the strength of divine power, including the strength of divine body based on the power of one integrating sword principle, Some were high level in integrating sword principle, so the moment they break through and become a universe god, the level of their divine power would be enhanced to an advanced or peak level, so they could easily become an advanced universe god or peak universe god after they enhanced their unique skill. But there are also some who had too low of a level in integrating sword principle, so their divine power merely reached the level of a beginner universe god when they become a universe god. Even if they constantly enhance their power with the aid of unique skills and secret skills in the future, it'd still be difficult for them to become a peak universe god in the first heaven. It'd be a dream for them to even undergo God's test in the second heaven. As for me, I combined the 3 strongest sword principles and I am an inverse cultivator. The moment I break through and become universe god, my divine power would be ridiculously strong. I could feel that the strength of my divine power is about 100 times stronger than an ordinary peak universe god in the first heaven. Jian Wushuang was surprised. That was the benefit for cultivation from combining 3 strongest sword principle. If he were to be like an ordinary cultivator where the combined sword principle wasn't as strong, or he only combined one of the strongest sword principles with 2 other creation-level sword principles, it was reckoned that the strength of his divine power after he became a universe god wouldn't be comparable to peak universe god in the first heaven. Even with his special circumstance that he was doing inverse cultivation, his divine power would only be stronger by a few folds than a peak universe god in the first heaven. But then, as he combined the 3 strongest sword principles, his divine power was 100 times more powerful than a peak universe god in the first heaven once he became universe god. How great of an advantage that was! Just as Jian Wushuang transformed his divine power, a brilliant golden light lit up. The dim golden light was formed entirely by pure ancient god power and it was soaring towards Jian Wushuang's glabella that very moment. His ancient god body exposed naturally. On his glabella, there were originally 4 four-pointed stars. Then, along with the gathering of dim golden light, the 5th four-pointed star quickly gathered and it took shape very quickly. 5-star ancient god, it's here. 5-star ancient god. Jian Wushuang clenched his fist as he felt the tremendous increment of the ancient god power. He felt extremely happy. Right then. Huh? Jian Wushuang suddenly felt a stir in his heart. Right when he became 5-star ancient god, there was an extra part of memory that appeared in his head. The memory had no symptoms and it appeared directly in his head. Memory inheritance. Jian Wushuang shook. He wasn't unfamiliar with the sight. Back then, when he first woke the blood of an ancient god, the same scene happened. He, too, inherited part of the memory and mastered the 3 fingers of ancient god. The 3 fingers of ancient god was a unique skill of the ancient god clan and it had been rather useful for Jian Wushuang. Then, as he became a 5-star ancient god, there was another part of memory inheritance that appeared in his head. The content of the inheritance memory was another unique skill, and it was also 3 fingers. It turned out that the supreme unique skill of an ancient god clan wasn't only 3 fingers. Jian Wushuang commented. In the inheritance memory, he received a brand new 3 fingers technique. It was the 4th finger. God's test. The 5th finger. Get through difficulty. The 6th finger. Sun corrosion. The 3 fingers were fiercer compared to the 3 fingers, including break boundaries, break the star, destroy the world that Jian Wushuang obtained previously. Of course, the requirement to perform was much stricter. With the 3 new fingers, I have another trump card on hand. Jian Wushuang smiled and then closed his eyes to continue enjoying the transformation. His divine power and ancient god power had fully transformed. But his divine body continued to level up tremendously. While a large number of cultivators waited patiently outside Tribunal Passing Pinnacle. When they saw the descending divine light, they could tell that Jian Wushuang wasn't dead. Just as expected, they could feel Jian Wushuang's breathing again. The reason why they could feel him again was that the divine light helped Jian Wushuang recover from his injuries and Jian Wushuang's aura was elevated. Along with Jian Wushuang's aura growing stronger and fiercer, the speed of the elevation was extremely terrifying. The transformation continued for about an hour and finally ceased. The huge thundercloud in the void above finally dispersed and disappeared entirely. At the bottom of the huge pit on Tribunal Passing Pinnacle, 9 rays of divine light put its capability to full play and it then disappeared entirely. Everything settled down. All living things in the universe resumed their tranquility. In the silence, a figure slowly rose up from the pit and finally appeared in the universe. When the figure appeared, he instantly became the center of attention. Countless gazes suddenly gathered in the same direction. Chapter 1323, The Only Opportunities. Chapter 1323, The Only Opportunities. Jian Wushuang. Cultivators and universe gods outside the tribulation passing pinnacle started at the sight of the figure rising from the hole, standing without a word for a long time. This was definitely the most unforgettable day for those universe gods. They had witnessed the most horrible god test ever in the eternal chaotic world. And they also had witnessed the success of an unprecedented genius. Right now the genius was in front of them. In the eyes of all, Jian Wushuang fully recovered all his injuries and smiled to all those who were watching him. Whiz! A streak of scarlet light gushed from the earth and flashed toward Jian Wushuang. And the light transformed into a 1,000-foot moon gazer. Hi my bro. King of Venomous Worms nodded, looking at Jian Wushuang excitedly with his scarlet eyes. It's good to see you again. Jian Wushuang smiled to King of Venomous Worms. You too. King of Venomous Worms nodded. Come back into my body. I now feel uncomfortable when I am without you. So King of Venomous Worms nodded and transformed into a streak of scarlet light and got into Jian Wushuang's body. King of Venomous Worms clearly felt the difference when he entered into Jian Wushuang's body. Quite a big change. King of Venomous Worms said. Yes. Jian Wushuang smiled. You must be powerful at this level. King of Venomous Worms said. Jian Wushuang nodded, I feel that I am much more powerful than I was. But to what extent? I should have a try and find out. Then have a try. King of Venomous Worms felt confused. Jian Wushuang headed to the crowd. Master of the Dayu Palace, Lord Wuzang and Scarlet Island Master came to welcome him. Good job, Jian Wushuang. Master of the Dayu Palace expressed his admiration. The words of Master of the Dayu Palace surprised others. After all, the privileged master seldom expressed his admiration to someone in the public. But the power and the resilience of Jian Wushuang was indeed worth his admiration. Lord Wuzang also asked Jian Wushuang, how about having a talk together? Sure. Jian Wushuang nodded. Then Jian Wushuang looked at those from the Scarlet Island. Congratulations. Scarlet Island Master expressed his congratulations after staring at Jian Wushuang for a while. Jian Wushuang was very happy when he heard the word. It was really a delightful moment. Congratulations. Congratulations. Many universe gods, whether they had made acquaintance with Jian Wushuang, all congratulated him. Some talked to Jian Wushuang humbly, and even felt frightened. After all, even though they were universe gods from the second heaven, they couldn't survive such a horrible god test. And Jian Wushuang had impressed them with his power and skills. After saying thanks and talking with the others, Jian Wushuang suddenly looked toward one direction. It was where the crowd from the Holy Prefecture were standing. They felt nervous when Jian Wushuang looked at them. Especially universe god Jiu Hai, who had mixed feelings. He had believed that Jian Wushuang would die in the god test. And the god test had indeed caused great difficulties to Jian Wushuang. But unexpectedly, Jian Wushuang survived. And now, Jian Wushuang had made a breakthrough and become universe god of the first heaven, which made it more difficult for universe god Jiu Hai to take revenge. Universe God Jiu Hai, Jian Wushuang said. Universe God Jiu Hai looked at Jian Wushuang. Okay, you are lucky this time. You are right, or I will die many times. Jian Wushuang continued, very soon I will be leaving the Daiyu universe. Leaving? Universe God Jiu Hai frowned. Other universe gods around them were not surprised to hear so. For geniuses like Jian Wushuang, staying in the Daiyu universe would be a waste for their talents. Jian Wushuang could only unleash his potential in more prestigious places like the Snow Dojo or the 10 cultivation sanctuaries. What do you mean? Universe God Jiu Hai looked at Jian Wushuang indifferently. I mean, if you are going to take revenge for your disciples, don't lose the opportunity while I am here. Do you think I will let you get away? Universe God Jiu Hai said. Definitely not. Jian Wushuang continued, that's why I will give you an opportunity to kill me. How about today? You can do whatever you want to kill me, without any intervention by talents from the Scarlet Island. And I would also ask Master of the Daiyu Palace not to stop you. What Jian Wushuang said stirred a strong response in the crowd. What? Universe gods from the Scarlet Island frowned. Do you mean you are going to fight with me individually? Exactly. Jian Wushuang nodded smilingly, that's the only opportunity you have to take revenge for your deceased disciples. Universe God Jiu Hai felt nervous and hesitated. Other universe gods were quite interested in how Universe God Jiu Hai replied. Chapter 1324, An Explosive Roar. Chapter 1324, An Explosive Roar. Universe God Jiu Hai had complicated feelings. He wished to kill Jian Wushuang, but he was afraid that he wasn't Jian Wushuang's match. He watched Jian Wushuang as he underwent God's test. He passed through such a terrifying God's test, then he broke through and became a universe god in the first heaven. His power definitely increased tremendously. I am a universe god in the second heaven and there are so many people gathering around. Regardless, I can't be intimidated by a universe god in the first heaven who just passed the god's test. Universe God Jiu Hai clenched his fists and his eyes were glistening with determination. He had obviously made a decision. Jian Wushuang, this is what you asked for. Universe God Jiu Hai looked towards Jian Wushuang again. Come on, Jian Wushuang smiled faintly with confidence. The surrounding crowd saw and made space for it to be a battlefield. In the void, before the gaze of various universe gods, Jian Wushuang was standing face to face with Universe God Jiu Hai. Universe God Jiu Hai was beaming with a strong murderous intention as he glared at Jian Wushuang. He's just undergone God's test and the divine power in his body should have started transforming. The overall increment in power shouldn't be too vast. However, he has quite a number of trump cards. I can't give him any chance to play one. I shall use my strongest power and kill him straight away with thunder power. Universe God Jiu Hai thought clearly and quickly made a move. Virum. A vast expanse of divine power surged out from Universe God Jiu Hai's body and it formed a huge crimson ocean that instant. The boundless divine power flowing insanely within Crimson Ocean while Universe God Jiu Hai flipped his palm and a crimson long spear appeared in his hand. Universe God Jiu Hai moved his wrist and the crimson long spear parted the surrounding ocean. When he took a stride, he instantly moved across a far distance and appeared before Jian Wushuang. The crimson long spear became a crimson, flowing light and plundered forward. The very moment the crimson long spear plundered forward, the ocean with omnipotent divine power gathered at an unbelievable speed. In the end, the boundless power of the divine power ocean flowed into the long spear and the power of the long spear increased tremendously. This is the strongest spear I've created through my cultivation for a long time. Jian Wushuang, die. Universe God Jiu Hai shrilled. The long spear let out a billowing force at that very moment and everyone was astonished. Such strong power. He lived up to his position as the master of Jiu-Hai Mansion. Although he is the last among all 4 mansion masters in Holy Prefecture, he was a universe god in the second heaven after all. Universe god Jiu-Hai pulled the strongest unique skill right at the beginning. Universe god Jiu-Hai didn't show mercy at all. He wanted to let out his strongest power right at the beginning so that Jian Wushuang couldn't perform any trump cards in time. His thinking was sound, but unfortunately, he underestimated Jian Wushuang's power. In the void, Jian Wushuang stood calmly as he watched the crimson flowing light charged towards him coldly. Then, he creased his eyebrows slightly. This spear feels so weak. Jian Wushuang stood there without moving an inch. He didn't look like he was going to block the attack. He let the crimson flowing light charge at his chest. You're asking for death. Universe god Jiu-Hai saw and gave an explosive roar as he laughed coldly in his head. The very next moment, the crimson flowing light hit on Jian Wushuang's chest straight away without hindrance. Clash! The noise of metal clashing against each other was heard. The power that the crimson flowing light contained exploded entirely. The ferocious divine power pressed on the surface of Jian Wushuang's blood-killing plate armor and constantly made noises, but Jian Wushuang's body didn't move. Very soon, the crimson, flowing light exhausted and dispersed. In the end, there was a crimson long spear stabbed on Jian Wushuang's chest. Universe god Jiu-Hai opened his eyes wide then. How is it possible? Universe god looked at the sight before him in shock. The strongest spear he had used with his all hit Jian Wushuang without any hindrance. But in the end, Jian Wushuang didn't even move an inch. From the beginning till the end, Jian Wushuang didn't move at all. One must know, even if Jian Wushuang's divine body could resist his attack, the impact of his long spear should cause Jian Wushuang to move back, but he didn't even move an inch. In other words, Jian Wushuang's divine body was stronger beyond his imagination. It was so strong that he could ignore the impact that the long spear instilled. His strongest spear might only be a scratch or an itch to Jian Wushuang. Universe god Jiu-Hai, your strongest power is merely at such a level? Jian Wushuang overlooked coldly. Universe god Jiu-Hai was speechless in astonishment. Too weak. Jian Wushuang shook his head. With power of such a level, you aren't even qualified to be killed in my hand. Go away. The divine power and ancient god power in Jian Wushuang's body erupted. The roar came out from his ancient god mouth and it suddenly shook the earth. Rumble. A tremendous noise broke out in the universe. Universe god Jiu-Hai bore the brunt naturally as he was right in front of Jian Wushuang. The terrifying sound wave brought about an unbelievable impact and hit Universe god Jiu-Hai directly. His ears, nose and mouth were instantly bleeding, while all over his body and organs got severely injured. He was shot backwards like a cannon. Even the crimson long spear in his hand flew off. Universe god Jiu-Hai stood on his feet again. He just stood up and he immediately spat a mouthful of blood again. He lifted his head and stared at Jian Wushuang. His eyes were full of terror. The surrounding spectator was in awe. They knew that Jian Wushuang, who underwent the terrifying god's test, definitely would have a tremendous improvement in power, but no one expected it to be so great. His divine body could resist Universe god Jiu-Hai's strongest spear without moving an inch. Just an explosive roar led to severe injury of Universe god Jiu-Hai. How scary his ability was. His defensive skill was strong originally. Previously, when he underwent the god's test, he relied on his divine body to resist 3 lightnings. Once he passed the god's test, the divine body naturally improved tremendously. To be able to resist Universe god Jiu-Hai's full blow with his divine body only, I can accept that. But with an explosive roar, he caused Universe god Jiu-Hai severe injury. That is a little unbelievable. The master of Scarlet Island said in astonishment. It's divine power. The master of Dayu Palace who stood in the void, his pupil contracted, in his explosive roar, it contained a fierce divine power. With the strength of the divine power, if I didn't see it wrongly, I reckon he has reached the level of peak universe god of the second heaven. Chapter 1325, Jian Wushuang's Power Sword. Chapter 1325, Jian Wushuang's Power Sword. Now his divine power is equal to a peak universe god in the second heaven. It is because of the inverse cultivation. The legendary inverse cultivation. Master of the Dayu Palace and Lord Wuzong were both amazed by Jian Wushuang. Universe god Jiu Hai was only the primary level universe god in the second heaven. And Jian Wushuang's divine power skyrocketed as he roared, causing severe injuries of the formal one. Universe god Jiu Hai. Jian Wushuang glanced at him, I have given you the opportunity but it's you who hasn't seized it. Hearing the words, Universe god Jiu Hai was furious, but he could do nothing about it. Nothing. He also knew that today was the only opportunity for him. And it was unrealistic for him to take revenge in the future. Even if Jian Wushuang didn't leave the Dayu universe, his power would further develop to a level far beyond Universe God Jiu Hai. Now Universe God Jiu Hai fell into silence. And Jian Wushuang now shifted his attention to someone else. Golden Sun Sect Master. Jian Wushuang said. Golden Sun Sect Master, the thin elderly man with a golden robe looked toward Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang said to him immediately, You once asked me whether your son was killed by me. Now, my answer is yes. Golden Sun Sect Master looked at Jian Wushuang with a murderous look. Want to kill me? Jian Wushuang sneered. You are doomed to die. Golden Sun Sect Master got infuriated and jumped at him immediately. Everyone felt surprised. Soon after Jian Wushuang defeated Universe God Jiu Hai, he was now challenging Golden Sun Sect Master. But Golden Sun Sect Master, as the peak Universe God in the second heaven, was much more powerful than Universe God Jiu Hai. Why does Jian Wushuang keeping challenging those powerful Universe Gods? Talents from the Scarlet Island felt confused, including the Scarlet Island Master. It was clear why Jian Wushuang had challenged Universe God Jiu Hai. They had an old score to settle. But why did he choose to fight with Golden Sun Sect Master? Golden Sun Sect Master had been unsure about whether Jian Wushuang killed his son. And now, Jian Wushuang admitted it, giving Golden Sun Sect Master an excuse to kill him. Scarlet Island Master didn't think it was a wise choice. But he didn't know that Jian Wushuang did so in order to know what level he was now. Only by battling with powerful universe gods could he know how far he had gone. Jian Wushuang didn't use much effort to defeat Universe God Jiu Hai. That was why he had turned to Golden Sun Sect Master. Jian Wushuang felt excited to battle with this peak universe god in the second heaven. I will kill you. Golden Sun Sect Master took action without any hesitation, forming a horrible power immediately. A strong pressure came to Jian Wushuang. A peak universe god is indeed superior to a primary one. Jian Wushuang smiled, without any fear. Come on. Boom. His divine power was soaring. Fully ready and aggressive, Jian Wushuang collided instantly with Golden Sun Sect Master. The latter, wearing a pair of golden gloves, collected all his divine power and beat Jian Wushuang in the instant of collision. Bang! After that, with a resounding tiger roar, the shadow of a giant golden tiger appeared behind Golden Sun Sect Master and slapped Jian Wushuang with its palm. In response, Jian Wushuang operated his power of the ancient god and the 4 stars between his eyebrows were shining. He clenched his hands and a horrible power broke out. The power, which was strong enough to smash the heavens, collided directly with the flap from Golden Sun Sect Master. Bang! In the collision, a tremendous divine power spread all around them, forming numerous power waves. Humph! Jian Wushuang's eyes were bursting with lightning. Bang! 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 And he gave 3 punches, combing the divine power and the ancient god power perfectly. Every punch contained a deadly force. Golden Sun Sect Master immediately responded, as fast as a thunder. Boom! 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 Golden Sun Sect Master was hit back by the 3 collisions, while Jian Wushuang stood still and resisted the great power. Golden Sun Sect Master exclaimed after he finally stood stably, "How powerful it is." Actually, Golden Sun Sect Master didn't use any secret skills. Instead, he confronted Jian Wushuang only with his divine power. And it turned out that Jian Wushuang had the advantage over him. Jian Wushuang, only a universe god in the first heaven, unleashed a power stronger than a peak universe god in the second heaven. Jian Wushuang was delighted about his power. With the inverse cultivation, combining the 3 most powerful swordsmanships, I am 100 times more powerful than the peak universe god in the first heaven. With the help of the blood-killing plate armor, my divine power is now equal to the peak universe god in the second heaven. I am also a 5-star royal ancient god. When my power roars, I can easily defeat Golden Sun Sect Master. Jian Wushuang was ecstatic. Jian Wushuang was only a universe god in the first heaven. But he had unleashed a power stronger than a peak universe god in the second heaven. Use all your power or you will be defeated. Jian Wushuang laughed resoundingly. Chapter 1326, Come to a Close. Chapter 1326, Come to a Close. Son, you only got stronger by a slight bit and you thought I couldn't deal with you? The master of Golden Sun Sect roared. He spoke then, and an ancient and bold aura soared up in the air. On the master of Golden Sun Sect's right palm, a strong golden light flowed and it was harsh on the eyes. The right hand of the master of Golden Sun Sect slapped. Emperor Print. Rumble. A boundless golden light immediately formed a huge golden palm. The golden palm brought. Jian Wushuang squinted slightly. His soul power had swept out long ago and he could clearly feel that the golden palm contained a terrifying power. Although I'm stronger than him in terms of strength, I'm far behind in terms of unique skill, Jian Wushuang sighed. He became universe god and had a tremendous improvement in power. Both his divine power and divine body had gone through a huge transformation. But on unique skill, there wasn't much difference. The strongest unique skill that he created was only Test Wrecker, which was only a beginner rank 2 unique skill. Then, the unique skill performed by the Master of Golden Sun Sect, its power was a peak rank 2 unique skill. Their difference in unique skill was too vast. I can't win against him with a unique skill. I have to rely on other measures to compensate for the difference. Jian Wushuang's glare turned cold. He flipped his hand and a golden calabash appeared in it. Swoosh! An enormous amount of blaze quicksand flowed out and formed a boundless desert that covered the entire battlefield. The Master of Golden Sun Sect, including the emperor-like handprint that he created, was covered by the quicksand. The terrifying realm pressure spread across directly. What? The Master of Golden Sun Sect was angry. How is this possible? How can my power be suppressed by 50%? 50%. Yes, the Master of Golden Sun Sect's power was actually suppressed by 50%. The power of the humongous handprint that he had pulled was suddenly weakened by 50%. Most of the people watching the battle noticed. The Blaze Quicksand realm was triggered by divine power. The stronger the divine power, naturally the more ridiculous the power that was triggered. Although Jian Wushuang was just a universe god in the first heaven, his diving power was not any weaker compared to a peak universe god in the second heaven. To trigger realm with such divine power, even I, a universe god in the third heaven, might be affected slightly too. Hence, for a peak universe god in the second heaven to be suppressed within the Blaze Quicksand realm, and to have his power suppressed by 50%, is actually quite normal. The master of Dayu Palace smiled faintly. The Blaze Quicksand realm was already very impressive. Otherwise, he wouldn't have borrowed it from Jian Wushuang previously. Then, Jian Wushuang became universe god and his divine power increased tremendously. When he triggered the realm again, the power was naturally far stronger than before. On the battlefield, after the formation of Blaze Quicksand realm posed great oppression to the Master of Golden Sun sect, there was an enormous amount of red flame that soared up from Jian Wushuang's body. The red flame suddenly formed a sea fire around while Jian Wushuang was the emperor among the sea fire. Scarlet Kingdom was performed straight away. The Blaze Quicksand realm was used to oppress the opponent while Scarlet Kingdom was used to increase his power significantly. Jian Wushuang merged the two techniques together perfectly. Then, Jian Wushuang drew his sword. Buzz! A cold sharp noise broke out across the sky. There was a sudden eye-catching sword light that caught everyone's attention. Jian Wushuang played the strongest stroke that he had created, Test Wrecker. With the aid of Scarlet Kingdom, the sword gave out an earth-shattering power. The very next moment, it collided with the huge handprint face-to-face. Rumble. A vigorous rumble and the universe shook. After the loud noise, Jian Wushuang, who was among the sea fire, suddenly stumbled and took a few steps back. But he steadied himself soon enough. So strong. There was a tinge of terror in Jian Wushuang's eyes. I am much stronger than him in strength. Plus, I've used both Blaze Quicksand Gourd and Scarlet Kingdom's realm and even performed my strongest sword principle. But I am still at an absolute disadvantage. Although Jian Wushuang was shocked, he understood the situation. They were two vastly different and unique skill after all. Jian Wushuang, you merely created a beginner rank 2 unique skill. You are still slightly behind if you want to be evenly matched with the Master of Golden Sun sect. Wait till you create an advanced rank 2 unique skill, then you should be able to fight face to face with him and not fall behind. King of Venomous Worm's voice was heard in Jian Wushuang's mind. Advanced rank 2 unique skill. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. A beginner rank 2 unique skill had been created. Hence, an advanced rank 2 unique skill naturally shouldn't be too far away for him. In the void before Jian Wushuang, the Master of Golden Sun sect stood there while his face grew grave. Although my full blow shook him off, he wasn't injured at all. There wasn't even any weakening of his aura. The Master of Golden Sun sect looked glum. A simple exchange of blows and he understood that he can't possibly kill Jian Wushuang. Even if he could defeat Jian Wushuang, he wouldn't be able to kill him. That's it. Suddenly, there was a voice. Swoosh. Swoosh. There were 2 figures that appeared right in the middle of the battlefield and stood in between Jian Wushuang and the Master of Golden Sun sect. Looking at the Master of Dayu Palace and Wuzang getting involved, Jian Wushuang and the Master of Golden Sun sect naturally ceased. The Master of Golden Sun sect, Universe God Jiu Hai, I know that you bear deep-seated hatred towards Jian Wushuang. However, Jian Wushuang gave both of you a chance and you didn't seize the opportunity. From today onwards, the 2 of you, including the forces under your control, should not find trouble with him. Otherwise, without him taking action, I will not be polite to any of you. The Master of Dayu Palace spoke coldly. Yes. The Master of Golden Sun sect and Universe God Jiu Hai nodded. The 2 of them didn't show any unwillingness. On the contrary, they held great gratitude towards the Master of Dayu Palace. Because the Master of Dayu Palace got involved with resolving the matter, it helped them too. With Jian Wushuang's talent, if you were to hold a grudge against them, things definitely wouldn't end well. As for the resentment between them and Jian Wushuang, in this world, the strong will forever be the master. Jian Wushuang gave them a chance to take revenge but they couldn't kill Jian Wushuang. So, who can they blame? Alright. This has ended. Dismissed. The master of Dayu Palace waved his hand. The surrounding universe gods heard, then they bowed before the master of Dayu Palace and left one after another. Of course, even after they left, whatever they saw that day would definitely be their topic of conversation for quite some time. They believed that it would also stir a commotion in the entire Dayu world because of what happened. After all, Jian Wushuang just underwent a god's test that everyone found unbelievable. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.